ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Suella Braverman insists she is the victim of a political witch hunt as she defends her record as Home Secretary.
A very good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 1st of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Paul and myself, Rosie. Here's what's leading the news.
The Home Secretary claiming she is not to blame for the crisis at the Manston Refugee Centre as she fights to remain in her job. Speaking in the Commons last night, she also addressed her handling of classified Home Office documents, accusing her critics of launching a witch hunt.
The Prime Minister and the Chancellor reportedly drawing up plans for major tax hikes in an effort to fill a £50 billion fiscal hole left by Liz Truss. The rises are expected to be announced in the autumn statement that we're expecting is going to take place on the 17th of November.
And star of The Crown, Elizabeth Debicki, has urged critics of the controversial show to move on. The actress who portrays Princess Diana said she hopes people would stop attacking the series now that a disclaimer has been added to the latest trailer.
Well, please do get in touch with us in the usual ways. What did you think about some of the language that Suella Braverman used yesterday in the Commons? Was it right for her to say that this was an invasion? How tenable do you think her position is? GB Views at gbnews.uk, or anything else you'd like to talk about, you can tweet us to at GB News.
Our top story then at just gone 6 o'clock. Suella Braverman has said she is the victim of a political witch hunt as she defends her record as Home Secretary.
Well, speaking in the Commons last night to address both the migrant crisis and her own handling of sensitive Home Office documents, she said mistakes had been made, but that she wouldn't apologise for things she hadn't done.
And addressing the Manston crisis, the Home Secretary said she wasn't to blame, claiming she had never blocked the use of hotels to ease pressure on the processing centre there.
She also described the influx of migrants as an invasion.
The British people deserve to know which party is serious about stopping the invasion on our southern coast and which party is not.
Well, joining us now for more is political commentator Peter Spencer. Very good morning to you, Peter. How do you think she fared in the Commons yesterday? Called up for questioning not over one issue, but two.
She certainly came out fighting, and she almost certainly has bought herself a certain amount of time. But at the same time, she's also worried quite a few people within the upper echelons of the Conservative Party. Of course, the Daily Mail lapped up her suggestion that this is an invasion of migrants. Heaven's sake, it's not as if these guys are actually trying to storm the ramparts. Many of them are escaping from war zones, and others, even if they're economic migrants, what they want to do is to better themselves by working hard when they get here. And the suggestion is, as I say, from a fair few voices within the Conservative Party, as well as her critics elsewhere, that she's actually pandering to far-right extremists. However, it did act as rather a handy smokescreen from her point of view to deflect from any perceived failings in her part. Now, what has happened, of course, is it's been unusually warm over the last few weeks, and an unusually large number of migrants have managed to make the perilous crossing across the channel. As a consequence, this centre in Kent, which is supposed to house up to 1,600 people, has been getting on for 3 times that number. So there's been a spread of disease, and there's been an awful lot of grief within the place, and it's not to be wondered at. The suggestion is that Suella Braverman has not tried hard enough to ensure that they're processed quickly, or that there's somewhere else for them to go. And that's the suggestion that's come from the Chief Inspector of Prisons, and it was very, very powerfully reinforced by a number of people within the House of Commons yesterday. However, as I say, she came out back fighting, and that has bought her at least a certain amount of time, but a place in the Home Office remains relatively perilous.
Was she pandering to the far right with that use of the word invasion, Peter, or was she simply reflecting the language that a significant number of people do use when talking about this crisis on the South Coast?
Well, I mean, I would say, and so, as I say, would many within the Conservative Party, as well as the critics elsewhere, that she was indeed pandering to the far right. Of course, she is fighting on more than one front. There are the questions that remain over her own apparently rather lax approach to cybersecurity, hence the fact that she had to resign once before getting reappointed. And it's worth taking a look at why it is that she is the Home Secretary at all. Remember that Rishi Sunak has a different perspective on migration from her. As far as he's concerned, there are gaps in the British job market which need to be filled, and then need to be filled by migrants. So he would, rather than tightening up the rules, he would rather loosen them in certain areas. However, it is indicative of his own relatively tenuous grip on power, the fact that he employed her at all. Remember that this was all about him being, up to a point, in hock to the right wing of the Tory party. And for so many years, it was a broad church and a very successful party, but more recently, as we've witnessed over the last few months, it's become a confederation, a loose confederation of warring tribes.
The real challenge for Rishi Sunak is lots of Conservatives believe that he needed Suella Braverman to secure the leadership, but now her position, if he says, right, this is just untenable anymore, that could harm him deeply if he can't employ someone in that role that can last a fortnight.
Well, we await developments on that front. I mean, he has to be seen by the Tory right to be defending his choice of Home Secretary, or, in effect, their choice of a right-wing person such as her in the government. Now, I suspect in his heart of hearts he would like to be rid of her, but he cannot be seen to sack her until or unless she makes another serious boo-boo and gets herself in a situation where she has no choice but to resign, in which case he, as I say, would probably heave a huge sigh of relief.
Is she the victim of a witch hunt?
Well, that is, again, that is part of the smokescreen that she has come out with to deflect attention from what appear to be failings on her part in finding places for this rather larger than usual number of migrants to stay somewhere other than in this hideously overcrowded and in some ways rather dangerous centre. Now, in fairness to her, I will just have to add that in all the years I've been at Westminster, I've always described the Home Office and thought of it as the ministry for stuff that goes wrong, because of the fact that whoever is Home Secretary, they spend their life firefighting. The one glorious exception to all this, of course, was Theresa May, who managed to run this ghastly place for years and years without any serious hitches. She got lucky.
Peter, good to get your thoughts this morning. That is political commentator Peter Spencer there. So let's look in a bit more detail at the migrant crisis, particularly the rising number of Albanians within those numbers that are crossing the Channel.
Yeah, speaking in the Commons last night, Isabel Braverman highlighted that specific issue, Albanian criminal gangs.
This year has seen a surge in the number of Albanian arrivals, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many of them, I'm afraid to say, abusing our modern slavery laws. We are working to ensure Albanian cases are processed and individuals are removed as swiftly as possible, sometimes within days. The Rwanda Partnership will further disrupt the business model of the smuggling gangs and deter migrants from putting their lives at risk. I'm committed to making that partnership work.
So these gangs are on the rise in the UK and shipping hundreds of millions of pounds in criminal proceeds back to their home country each year.
Well, that's what official sources have told GB News, that much of the surge in Albanians arriving across the English Channel on small boats is being orchestrated specifically by those gangs.
Many are being used to manage cannabis farms across the UK, as Albanian criminals have now taken over control of most of the country's cannabis trade, dominated previously by Vietnamese gangs. Our Home and Security editor Mark White has this exclusive report.
Albanian gangs are the dominant force in organised crime across the UK. We've been told that Albanian crime groups are shipping hundreds of millions of pounds in criminal proceeds back to Albania every year. A number of different businesses, like car washes and barber shops, are often used to launder the proceeds of crime. But in truth, the vast majority of the money they make from their criminal endeavours is simply carried back to Albania by hand or in vehicles. Recently, border officials seized £300,000 bound for Albania in luggage at a UK airport. In another incident, £500,000 was found hidden inside a van at a UK port. Albanian crime gangs now control the majority of cannabis farms across the UK. They've taken over much of the cannabis cultivation trade from Vietnamese crime groups, with most of the Albanian cannabis farms concentrated in the north. But in pretty much every part of the country, you'll find Albanians are the dominant group involved in cannabis cultivation, as we found out recently in Suffolk.
Is this what you're seeing time and again increasingly now, like other forces, that the Albanian organised criminal gangs are moving into these areas?
No, they are. They certainly seem to be on the up. They seem the dominant ones at the moment.
The trade in cannabis is largely self-contained amongst Albanian criminals here, with less control from crime bosses in their home country. In the south, they still control most of the cocaine trade, which is largely overseen by crime lords back in Albania. Across the UK, there has been a number of recent arrests of Albanians suspected of involvement in cross-channel people smuggling. Much of the surge in Albanians arriving by small boats lately is, we're told, being orchestrated by Albanian criminal gangs who want those people to work for them. Most of the people smuggling trade is still being controlled by Kurdish criminal gangs, but they are increasingly working in tandem with Albanian crime groups, who are advertising and arranging for people from the Western Balkan nation to head for northwest France before handing them over to the Kurdish gangmasters. Social media is a massive tool the Albanians have been using to good effect to attract their fellow countrymen and women. We've learned that the National Crime Agency has persuaded social media companies to remove 1,700 such videos in recent months. But for everyone they delete, many more pop up, persuading Albanians to cross the Channel and enter the UK's illegal economy.
Really interesting stuff there from our Home and Security editor, Mark White. As ever, if you want to feed back to us on that, on what you've just seen, GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Right now it's 13 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories making headlines. And the International Trade Secretary says the UK must future-proof its economy by investing in green technologies. In a speech in Newcastle later today, Kemi Badenoch's expected to highlight new tech to combat climate change and how they could create high-paying skilled jobs and energy security.
The Northern Ireland Secretary will hold talks with Stormont leaders later today. There is uncertainty over whether he will call an election. Chris Heaton-Harris didn't set a date for a new poll last Friday, even though he indicated he would.
And Collins Dictionary has announced that permacrisis is the word of the year. Well, the word describes an extended period of instability and insecurity. They've seen increasing usage of the word due to the ongoing crisis in the UK and across the world. The dictionary said it chose the word as it sums up quite succinctly just how truly awful 2022 has been for so many people.
It's a depressing word,
it's
permacrisis.
Very gloomy.
And partygates in there as well. Look, there's loads of words in there. This is according to the Collins Dictionary that you've probably heard of. Permacrisis, partygate, Kiev, quiet, quitting, the act of doing one's basic duties at work and no more.
Yeah, quiet quitting, that really did develop this year. There's also sports washing. We hear a lot about greenwashing, don't we? But sports washing apparently is a word for how organisations or countries use sports promotion to enhance reputations or distract from controversial activities or policies. I wonder which tournament they might be referring to.
I wonder which one coming up very soon in the Middle East they are referring to. And this is the word of the year for 2022. But 2022 isn't over yet, and given we've got the Qatar World Cup to come, surely sports washing would overtake permacrisis.
Well, we'd hope, because, that word then, an extended period of instability and security. Is that fair as a word to sum up the world? I would say over the last couple of years we've had some pretty turbulent ones, and for some, quite more traumatic than this year.
Also, if anything is a crisis for long enough, is it then, by definition, a crisis? Because that's the norm, right?
Does a crisis have a lifespan?
Isn't a crisis more than what is normally acceptable? So if it goes on for long enough, then it just becomes the norm, right?
So there's got to be an acute period of time for it to be a crisis.
I don't know.
Maybe. Or do you have a better word for the word of the year? Maybe you think permacrisis is appropriate.
Yeah.
Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. It would be really nice to have some slightly more positive ones.
Yeah.
If possible.
A positive word of the year for 2022. Something else that's it keeps causing a lot of controversy is this new series of The Crown. This is series 5, a new trailer's been released. And according to cast members, the latest offering will bring drama with a capital D.
The show's going to depict the royal family in the 1990s, including the famous 1992 fire at Windsor Castle and, of course, the divorce of Charles and Diana, which then led to the Queen to dub the year Annus Horribilis.
In a moment, we'll speak to Royal and Showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield. But first, let's have a look at this trailer.
Constancy, stability, duty.
So duty or drama, what's it going to be about? Let's check in.
That's very good.
With our reporter, Kinsey, live from LA. We've been told to expect drama with a capital D. Just tell us why.
Well, I mean, the 90s was some of the most horrific times for the British royal family in recent history. We are going to see a lot more of Prince Charles, now King Charles, and Camilla's love story, which kind of disappeared in season 4 because season 4 became the Diana season. And we're going to see the dissolving of Charles and Diana's relationship and how toxic that became. But you're absolutely right. This is a very controversial season, and I do believe that the royal family is incredibly nervous about the reaction that people will have to it, especially people that really aren't in tune with the true history of the royal family.
And Judi Dench has been speaking, I hear, about her decision to not and to never play the Queen.
So yes, I don't know if you remember, but a few weeks ago, Dame Judi Dench came out and said, begged the Crown, please. She put out a statement, please make it known that this is a drama and that this is not all of this is real. The Crown gave in marketing wise. We haven't seen yet if on the actual episodes they're going to put that disclaimer, but she was being considered to play the Queen Mother, we just found out, and she opted not to because she's close to the Queen Consort Camilla. She asked them to put the disclaimer when she was having those negotiations back and forth. They declined at the time. And she also had some issues with the script. So I think that gives us even more ammunition to be fearful for what's inside season 5, what's to come.
You know, some of the cast, particularly the actress who plays Diana in the latest series, she's front page of the Daily Mail this morning, Elizabeth Debicki, who just says, time to move on. We all know this is a drama. Why do you think this is still causing controversy? Because I think that there are so many young people that are just now being introduced to the British royal family through The Crown. And there are a lot of things that are not necessarily true. Specifically, the scene where Prince Charles approaches the Prime Minister and wants his mother to abdicate, that didn't happen. But young people sitting at home watching this for the first time that are listening to Harry and Meghan whine on Oprah Winfrey, they're not going to understand that some of these moments are clearly made up for the drama. And I think that is critical. That does hurt the royal family at the end of the day.
Yeah, difficult few months ahead, isn't it, Kinsey, for the royal family? They're nervous about this series of The Crown and then also Prince Harry's book.
Absolutely. This is not a good time for them. I'm sure that there are a lot of strategy sessions happening behind the scenes. And it's unfortunate when all eyes should be on the coronation and what's going to happen in May and how exciting that can be for not only the royal family, but for the UK. I think that it's going to bring in a lot of tourism. It's going to be a brilliant moment in history. And we all should be looking forward to that celebration, one that we haven't seen in 70 plus years. And unfortunately, we're kind of getting lost in this drama.
How do you think the palace could have handled this better? Could they have embraced a little bit more, or is it just too sort of salacious for them to even sort of step a toe in?
It's that never complain, never explain. I think that actually at the end of the day helps them out a lot. I think that it's very beneficial for them. This is a hard one because you can't deny the fact that King Charles fell in love with Camilla while he was married to Diana. And some of these instances truly did happen, but we don't know the conversations that happened behind closed doors. And that is when, that's when things kind of get a little too close to being, I don't know what word I'm looking for, but slanderous maybe? Is it slander to put words in these people's mouths? We don't really know the ins and outs.
Kinsey, good to get your thoughts this morning. Thanks for that. That's our showbiz and royal reporter, Kinsey Schofield, joining us live from LA.
Right now, 21 minutes past 6. Don't go anywhere. After the break, food banks are being forced to cut back on those real staple items, things like oil, because of the rising cost of living. Well, our national reporter, Ali Costello, will bring us the latest. That's after the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A windy start to the day, especially in the south where there are English Channel gales for a time. Showers for many, though, replacing the main area of rain that went through during the night, and that rain is now clearing the east of England, northeast Scotland, pushing into the Northern Isles. Now, there are further weather fronts coming through during the rest of the day. They'll contain showery rain, and so really it's rain on and off for many, carried through by this gusty wind. Although the Channel's gales will moderate through the day, I think it's going to stay very blustery in the south, particularly around coasts, and these showers will come through at pace. Where they occur, they're going to be heavy with the threat of thunder, but they'll be interspersed by some brighter spells. 15 or 16 Celsius in the south, 12 or 13 further north. I think northern England, southern Scotland, eastern Scotland seeing some drier and brighter spells for a time, but showers will continue for western Scotland and Northern Ireland, eventually pushing through the rest of Scotland, much of England and Wales as well during the evening. Eventually, during the early hours of tomorrow, we're going to see some clearer interludes, some lighter winds, and as a result, It's going to be a colder night compared with recent nights, certainly a fresher start to Wednesday compared with recent mornings. But some brightness around first thing for much of central and eastern Scotland, England and Wales. Quite quickly, however, through the morning, further wet and windy weather reaches Northern Ireland into Scotland and then much of northern and western England as well as Wales. The wind's really picking up through the day. Gale force across Irish Sea coast with the risk of 65-mile-per-hour wind gusts. That could cause disruption, yellow warning in force for that. But the rain doesn't quite reach eastern England until the end of the day. Bright and breezy here, whilst it persists in the southeast on Thursday with bright spells and showers following to the rest of the UK. Either way, it stays blustery, but temperatures fall.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back, 6:25. Lots to come on the programme today. In about 20 minutes, we're going to be speaking to the double amputee who's living his dream as a rugby league kit man.
Looking forward to that. And just after 7:45, we'll speak to the Shadow Culture Secretary about the online safety bill and ask her why they think delaying it has allowed misinformation and abuse to run rampant.
And please keep your views coming in. Lots of you got opinions on what Suella Braverman had to say in the House of Commons yesterday. Morning to Wendy, who says, at last we have a strong and honest Home Secretary. Suella speaking for the majority of British people.
Yeah, and Chris says Stella was absolutely correct in what she said. It is an invasion. We have had a population rise of 10 million since the turn of the century.
So what do you make of the language that she used? She said the migrant crisis was out of control. She said it was an invasion. Was that appropriate? Are you sort of celebrating her rallying cry? Do you think she speaks for a silent majority? Or do you think the language was appalling? GBviews at gbnews.uk. We want to hear all views. You can tweet us too at gbnews.
Also talking this morning about the word of the year, which, according to Collins Dictionary, is permacrisis, after a period which has seen people live through war, inflation, climate change and political instability. And it's one of the reasons why there's a growing use of food banks. They're being forced to cut Staple items such as oil, because of the rising cost of groceries, it comes as everyday items, have increased due to that inflation in price by up to 65%.
Now, it's around 9.7 million adults in the UK who could not afford food in the month of September. That's according to the Food Foundation, with 4 million children impacted.
Our national reporter Ellie Costello visited a food bank in southwest London that has changed the contents of its food parcels to keep up with demand.
Past, maybe once a month you might get someone that's coming in that literally hadn't eaten, that was starving. We now have every week there's at least one, usually several people that are in that state that are coming in, and they've already been struggling for some time, and they may not have eaten for 3 to 4 days.
Charlotte White runs Earlsfield Food Bank in southwest London. She says demand for food parcels has quadrupled in the past 2 years with the hangover from the pandemic and now the cost of living crisis.
I'd say over 50-60% of our current guests are families with children, and many more working people as well. We never used to see that as much, but many people who are working, trying to get all the hours they can, and it's just not enough to get by. We had someone recently that just couldn't afford to feed the family every evening, so the mother didn't eat, but then also she took it in turns to feed her son or daughter because she couldn't afford to feed both of them every single night, and that was just heartbreaking.
The latest ONS data has revealed that some everyday items have risen dramatically in the past 12 months. Vegetable oil is up 65% on last year, pasta is up 60%, and tea is up 46%. Inflation is hitting the food bank hard too.
We've noticed a massive difference in price to the extent that we've had to cut certain items. So we always used to give oil, and oil's very popular, I guess. We just can't afford to do that anymore. We've had to cut the amount of toiletries that we give, which is a real shame because, hygiene is a massive thing, and that will affect, someone's mental health, someone's confidence, but we just can't afford to give the level that we were giving before. The other thing we've noticed is recently there's been an increase in demand in foods that can be made with a kettle. So instant noodles, cup of soup, instant mash, but they've also gone up in price. The other thing that we're really picking up on at the moment is a sense of fear because real winter hasn't started. Because at the moment, you can get by without putting your heating on, it's quite warm, but in a few weeks' time, it's going to be really difficult and people are really, really worried.
Well, the Trussell Trust, the UK food bank charity, has warned GB News that food banks face the hardest winter yet as they prepare to provide a predicted 1.3 million food parcels in the next 6 months, including 500,000 for children. The Trussell Trust distributed 46% more emergency food parcels in August and September than they did in 2021. This means that for the first time ever, the gap between donations and food being distributed is widening, and food banks have already used up the reserve stock that would normally help them get through the winter. As more people find themselves unable to afford the essentials, food banks are struggling to meet the increased need and are having to purchase 3 times as much food as they did last year. This financial year, food banks have bought approximately 1,400 tonnes of food, the equivalent of 111 double-decker buses. Despite a challenging winter ahead, Charlotte is touched by the generosity of her community.
We are in the bleakest and darkest of times, but one thing that has been quite powerful is a sense of community coming together.
Ellie Costello, GB News.
Yeah, very sad and dark times, which is why this word permacrisis is the word of the year, according to the Collins Dictionary. Do let us know what you thought about that report at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Don't go anywhere after the break. We're going through the papers with Norman Baker and Cindy Yu. That's next.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations. for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Welcome back. Good to have you with us. It is 6:33. Let's bring you up to date with what is happening this morning.
The Home Secretary's vowed to fix the UK's broken asylum system. Suella Braverman rejected calls to resign over her response to the migrant crisis. There are thought to be around 4,000 migrants at the processing facility in Manston. It's designed to hold around 1,500.
People could face tax rises for years to come as Rishi Sunak looks to address a black hole of up to £50 billion in the public finances. Daily Telegraph says the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt will attempt to fill the shortfall through a combination of 50% tax rises and 50% public spending cuts.
Farmers have warned about the potential impact on the supply of turkeys this Christmas amid the UK's largest outbreak of bird flu. They say the current situation is unbelievably bad and represents the foot and mouth of the poultry industry. Well, bird keepers in England will be required to house their poultry indoors to tackle the spread of avian influenza.
Right, let's go through this morning's papers with former Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker and broadcaster editor of The Spectator, Cindy Yu. A very good morning to both of you.
Morning.
Morning. Thanks for being with us. Norman, well, actually, both of you kind of want to draw on similar connected stories, don't we? Norman, front page of the Times, alarm at Braverman's immigration rhetoric.
Yes, this is criticism from her own party, actually, let's be quite clear about this, from Roger Gale, the local MP in Thanet, who's far from being a left-wing lunatic, as other opponents have been described as. He is criticised in very strong terms. He had a statement in the Commons yesterday. He said, "I fear there's a very great danger with her inflammatory language. People tend to use her language carefully because extremists latch onto those words." And she's also been criticised by two former Tory Home Office ministers. One of Priti Patel's colleagues described her language as horrific. I mean, these are very strong words from her own party, let alone from people outside the party, such as myself. And you have to be very careful when you use language about these matters. Otherwise, what you do is you end up with more petrol bombs being thrown at particular sites, and that's not helpful in any shape or form. The fact of the matter was that the Manston site, which is a centre of all this down there in Kent, was running apparently reasonably well until she became Home Secretary. And Roger Gale has made the allegation that she's deliberately allowed it to deteriorate in order to send a message to those who might want to come across to England that this is what you will put up with, some horrific conditions. And that's a very serious matter. And for him to make that sort of allegation in the Commons is actually quite extraordinary.
She's promised to fix what she described as a broken system. How can she?
Well, she won't, I don't think. I mean, look, she called this an invasion. That's a very inflammatory term, considering what we've gone through in this country, the Second World War and everything else, an invasion. If you look at the number of figures of people in different European countries, there are 1.25 million migrants in Germany, 500,000 in France, 3.5 million in Turkey, and the UK, I think, is 135,000 at the moment. So we are not seeing the bulk of migration that other countries are seeing. Part of the problem in this country, and it goes back beyond Braverman, is that we don't process people quickly enough. There are 83,000 people who haven't been processed, and that's part of the problem. There's a big backlog of people having their cases assessed. The other thing we have to do, I mean, she seems to want to make lump together the idea of economic migrants and genuine refugees. There are people here who are coming across the channel, who are desperate, who are fleeing for their lives from somewhere or other, who have been tortured perhaps in their own countries, and need to be treated with compassion. Equally, there are people coming across, we heard it on your report, Albanian gangs.
Yeah, a rising number.
Yes, who are seeking to exploit the situation. Now, I don't see why we cannot separate out those two groups, and we can say to people coming from Albania, where there isn't a human rights problem, as far as I can tell, you know, why are you here? It's not a human rights issue. And we ought to be able to
do what with those
fast-track those people back to Albania. That's what we should be doing, and dealing compassionately with those who genuinely need our help.
Yeah, Sydney, with this use of the word invasion, I've got some definitions here, and one of them is, an instance of invading a country or region with an armed force, which critics would say that's why she was using that word in that context, but also an incursion by a large number of people or things into a place or sphere of activity, an unwelcome intrusion into another's domain. The word invasion, a lot of people will have used that word, and they will see Suella Braverman using it and think, yeah, she's talking our language.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are concerned. We're talking about 1,000 new arrivals a day. That does sound very scary because it's a high number of people. And as Norman says, they're not being processed on the other end. So they're just kind of crowding in these migrant centres and nothing's being done about them. And of course, in nearby areas like Calais, we've heard about, crime in the jungle and that kind of thing. At the same time, is these people, even if they are economic migrants, even if they are coming just to make money for family back home, they're not here with malice about the people in this country. And you might be concerned about what does it mean for British culture to have this kind of influx of people from different cultures coming in. And that's a separate conversation to be had. But to call that an invasion is a separate issue. And I think it's very, it's
Is it an appropriate word?
No, not at all. I mean, Suella Braverman, she's lashing out because she doesn't have the answer to this question. You can answer this question in a conservative way if you wanted to, but there are two problems here, which is, A, she is quite extreme on the asylum issue, and also, B, she's not a competent Home Secretary. So there are two separate issues here. I think even if you agreed with her that this was a problem, there are people who might have managed this a bit better. People say that Grant Shapps, in his 6 days as Home Secretary, dealt with it better than she did. Priti Patel signed off on hotels over the summer when she had to. It does seem like Suella Braverman just has been sitting on her hands.
Well, she says she didn't block the signing off of hotels, that option is still there.
Yes, but I understand the situation as you have to continuously sign off so that people are being moved on when these centres are being overcrowded, which is something that Priti Patel, someone you can't accuse of being a liberal, wet, generous-hearted person when it comes to immigration necessarily. She's tough on it too, but it never got this bad. Norma mentioned the people in her party who was criticising Suella Braverman. I think obviously there are people in her party who don't like her, who are out for her. This is a Conservative party after all. Only recently she betrayed Liz Truss, she didn't back Boris Johnson, so there are people out to get her for sure. She is right that, they are there. At the same time, this is a serious issue that has got worse under her watch.
Yeah, you also questioned her competency. She has admitted to making mistakes, and she said she's learned from those mistakes, and that the information that she sent on her personal email, it wasn't top secret, it wasn't classified, it wasn't an issue of national security.
Well, look, she clearly didn't intend to CC someone else's staffer into that email. So had it been an issue of national security, had it been someone else that she CC'd into, it could have been really bad, and that's the point. And I think on that particular issue, it's still a question about what actually happened, because her own story is changing all of the time. She's now saying that she has actually done this 5 times before then to her own personal email, not CCing other people into it, but sent it to her personal email, which we know from the Liz Truss hacking scandal earlier in the year. This kind of stuff really matters, to have insecure devices, insecure accounts. So I think it's very dangerous for Rishi Sunak, this current situation, because it could very well blow back in his face very quickly.
That's entirely true. I would just say that on day one, when I became a Home Office Minister, we were given very strict instructions about how you deal with security, including not sending emails on and messages on private phones. That was told me on day one. So she would have known that. And she's a serial offender. 7 times in the last month she sent emails. 7 strikes and you're out, perhaps, is the language you might understand. That's where she should be. She's not only done that, she's also been guilty of, apparently, of ignoring official advice from the Home Office that she was behaving illegally over the way she was dealing with migrants. You cannot have a Home Secretary behaving illegally. She's the person to uphold the law. You've got Alex Younger, the head of MI6, saying that ministers now need to be trained about how they handle cyber security and so on. She's a disaster as Home Secretary. She needs to be replaced.
Shall we move from the Home Secretary to the Chancellor? Front page of the Telegraph, Norman. They've got this exclusive on what they think is going to be in the budget on the 17th of November. Sweeping tax rises on a rough road ahead. What have they discovered?
Well, they've discovered, apparently discovered, because everybody's keeping their cards close to their chest, that there's going to be big spending cuts and big tax rises. Well, I guess we could have guessed that anyway in advance. And the suggestion is that the £50 billion black hole will be funded by 25 billion of cuts and 25 billion of tax rises. And Jeremy Hunt, or whoever's briefing out to the Telegraph, seems to suggest that this will be a matter for those with the broadest shoulders to carry the biggest burden, which is absolutely the right policy. We are going to have tax increases. But this is clearly going to have an effect on the economy. We're going back now to perhaps George Osborne's austerity years.
They've said they're going to protect the most vulnerable.
Yes. Well, I don't know whether they will do or not, but I mean, that's what they've said. And I think Jeremy Hunt is a decent man, actually, so I think he will try and do that.
Yeah.
To what extent do you think we're talking about tough decisions that the Prime Minister is going to have to make? It looks like, from this Daily Telegraph article, it's going to be tough for everybody.
Yeah, I think it will be tough for everybody, but the way he's going to try to spin it is to say it'll be tougher on those who can afford it the most. And that was where Liz Truss went wrong with her budget, where it was, tough times for everyone except for those who pay the top band of tax, who get a tax cut, or bankers who get a bonus cap lifting. So I think what we've seen from Rishi Sunak when he was Chancellor as well is that he's happy to raise taxes, but he's going to be raising taxes on those who can pay the most, like energy companies, for example. I've got here a story on The Times which says that public sector workers face only a 2% pay rise next year. Obviously, that's a real terms pay cut when inflation is 10%. So I think everyone is going to have a very, very difficult time next year. There will be some vulnerable people who have worse times than some who are a bit more well off. But Rishi Sunak is going to be trying to say, look, we are taking more from the energy companies, for example, or bankers, or whatever it is, in order to be able to play that card to say that broadest shoulders.
Yeah, although this is just such depressing economic news.
Of course.
With squeeze on pay rises, interest rates going up. It's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to see where growth can come.
Well, it is difficult to see where growth will come, and it's also going to be very difficult for individuals and families who see big inflation increases in their spending, reductions effectively in the amount of money they got to use. That will affect the economy. It's going to make it more difficult for businesses to survive because people are spending less money. And it's going to be very tough all round. And I think it will end up with more unemployment, unfortunately, as a consequence. And we'll move towards a recession. And none of that's very good for the country. But I don't see very much as a way of alternative because clearly the markets want the government to be competent and to be fiscally stable.
Although inflation is forecast to fall, is it next year or the year after?
Although the Bank of England has always been a bit dovish on this. They're always hoping it's going to be lower than it is. If you look at their running trajectory, it's always higher than what they forecast before. I mean, I don't mean to say that as a doomsayer, but, we are in very special times. The pandemic, we spent a lot of money making sure that everyone was OK.
Yeah.
This is the time that we need to start paying that back.
Yeah.
Let's move on, shall we? Front page of The Sun, if we can, Norman. We've had a little bit of royal news already on the programme, but they say the Crown betrays wills. Why so?
Well, this is because they're going to replicate or recreate, to some extent, the famous or infamous interview with Princess Diana and Mazen Bashir.
That panorama interview.
The panorama interview of the 1990s, which, of course, was terribly important at the time and subsequently was discredited to some degree by Martin Bashir.
And the BBC have said they won't air it again.
They have said that. And actually, I think this is the wrong way round because, like it or otherwise, it is an important moment in our history. It did affect the royal family and the direction of the country at the time, and I think to just say we can't ever see it again is probably wrong. We need to be sensitive about it, but I think we should be able to see bits of it in context, and apparently the BBC's ruled that out. So I'm unhappy with the BBC from doing that, but I'm even more unhappy with Netflix, because what Netflix are doing is exploiting that situation in a way that's going to be deeply harmful to Wills and Harry, I think, as the children of Diana, and to make things up. And I've never liked The Crown. I don't like speaking as a royal author, I don't like The Crown because I want to either see fiction or fact. I don't want to see something which pretends to be fact and actually is invaded by fiction.
You think the lines are too blurred? There is some fact in there and there is some fiction, but it's
you
too
can never
blurred.
quite tell what's true and what's not true, and that's not satisfactory for a television programme.
They have put a disclaimer on. Does that do enough?
No, it doesn't. I mean, look, they're out to make money from this. That's what they're doing, and they don't really mind how they do it.
Fair enough, though.
Well, fair enough, but I mean, there's collateral damage along the way, and that's not satisfactory.
Do you watch The Crown?
I used to, but then I got bored.
Right, OK.
And the drama's playing out in real time. Very quickly, can we just look in The Guardian, Cindy? Elon Musk obviously taken over Twitter, and we're getting an idea very rapidly that big changes are to come.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys have this blue tick. I certainly don't. Got rejected, actually. I'm not an authentic source. Yes, but anyone who has a blue tick, they're considering making them pay $20 a month from now on. So I mean, I think for most people watching this, it's probably not really a concern at all. But, you know, if you are one of those people with a blue tick, it might become less of a status symbol, more, you know, cheap, as if you've paid to have that kind of privilege. But to be honest, it was always, you know, a bit of a unnecessary status symbol, but yes, I mean...
Norman, I was just looking up to see if you've got a blue tick. Are you on Twitter?
I'm not on Twitter, but
you, Norman.
No, my view is that any politicians or ex-politicians on Twitter are only picked up when they say something they shouldn't say. So I don't want to be on Twitter, but I gather Elon Musk wants to call himself the chief twit, which is probably an appropriate designation.
Yeah, we're giving it to him by himself.
All this blue tick stuff, it's just for journalists and media and politicians, isn't it?
I think that the principle behind it was that so that you know it is the person that you're speaking to rather than as fake accounts.
And of course, fake accounts exist, and that is important. Yeah. But yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it'll be very exciting to see what Elon Musk is going to do with this company.
Cindy, Norman, thank you very much. We'll have you back in the studio in the next hour. In the meantime, at 10 to 7, let's bring you up to date with the other stories making the headlines today.
The International Trade Secretary says the UK must future-proof its economy by investing in green tech. In a speech in Newcastle later today, Kemi Badenoch is expected to highlight new initiatives to combat climate change and how they could create high-paying, skilled jobs and energy security.
The Northern Ireland Secretary is going to hold talks with Stormont leaders later today. There is uncertainty over whether he'll call an election. Chris Heaton-Harris didn't set a date for a new poll last Friday, despite indicating that he would.
And Collins Dictionary has announced that permacrisis is the word of the year. The word describes an extended period of instability and insecurity. It's seen an increasing use due to the ongoing crisis in the UK and the world.
Now, we often talk about our sporting heroes scoring goals, winning tackles in a stadium full of fans. But what about the people behind the scenes who get the players ready for that match?
Yeah, Mark Weevil is one of those people. He's been a professional kit man for rugby league clubs around the country, as well as the England squad, and has recently worked with the Jamaican team in the Rugby World Cup. Mark, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Rosie. Good morning, Paul. Thank you.
Now, talk to us about your personal condition, because for many people it would have been a challenge which meant they didn't pursue what they wanted to do. You lost both of your legs to a bone condition. That hasn't stopped you pursuing what you wanted to do.
No, it hasn't. Obviously it took quite a while for that to happen. I was late 20s when that sort of started, and unfortunately I had a bone disease called osteomyelitis, and that then led eventually to firstly my left leg being amputated below knee, 2001, where I was working at Huddersfield Giants, and then following that the right leg had to be amputated in 2004. Where I was still working in the game, and was fortunate enough to go back to the Giants in 2004.
To have that life-changing condition must have been incredibly difficult for you. You must be so proud to have achieved what you have since then.
Yeah, looking back on especially what's happened this last 3 weeks and being with Jamaica and having that opportunity, I mean, it sort of comes back in your mind, and you really do think about how well you've done. And I know that there's a lot of people out there, and I've had a lot of support from the clubs and from players and amateur clubs where I'm involved at News and Panthers at Huddersfield, and that sort of helped me in the last 2 or 3 years where we've had COVID. And I got made redundant from the Rugby Union Club in 2020 at Yorkshire Carnegie in Leeds. And I got asked to go and help them, and I went there, and it sort of helped my mental health to get back into doing something. But yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate really that when things have happened, I've tended to be positive and found a positive out of most of the things. And but I just came into the job, and from the very beginning, I just love what I do. Absolutely love it.
You've talked about sort of the impact on your own mental health, but being positive and being a sort of very trusted member of the team is such an integral part of what you're doing. How do you foster that relationship with the team?
I think really I've learned over the years, and you're always learning, because going into Jamaica, although I did know some of the lads previously, you have to get to know them individually and their little traits and their little things, and try and provide for them as best you can, because that's what I want to do for the job, to provide for everybody to be able to do exactly what they want and get out there and be at the best before they even start. But I think some of it is I've always been positive, and I can show that and support people when they're injured and when they're struggling, because I've been through that. But it's just a case of some of the things that I've done, and the way I am is that I sort of throw the humour in, before we start. I can talk about me and we have a bit of a laugh, and I think it inspires them. And fortunately, when I went to Leeds and after Huddersfield, I'm getting selected to do these jobs then, because I feel like I'm the best, if not one of the best, in this role. I got picked for England in 2006 because they wanted me, and I was good at the job. I should have gone to Australia with Great Britain, but I'd had a kidney transplant and I couldn't go out of the country for 12 months. So therefore, when I look back, I can turn that into a positive, because Great Britain didn't win the test, but England won the Federation Shield in 2006 with Paul Cullen, so I came away with a medal. Although some people might say, well, a trip to Australia would have been fantastic.
Yeah, but you've achieved so much, Mark, and the kit man is such an unsung role. It's so important. It's at so many clubs, not just at the elite level where you've helped out, but also at the grassroots level. Just finally, before we let you go, how do you think England are getting on in the Rugby League World Cup? They've got a quarter-final against Papua New Guinea to come. Can they win it?
No, I'm afraid Jamaica went out at weekend. So we're done and dusted now. So that's us. But I don't know. I don't know who's going to win. Don't know if England's going to manage it, or New Zealand or Australia, really. But we played New Zealand and we created some history, and they were absolutely fantastic with us. I'd just like to say that where I work at Newsham, we have a lady whose husband, her sons, her grandsons play, and she's got MND. I am a friend of Rob Burrows. I know Rob Burrows very well, and Kevin Sinfield, because I've worked around Leeds. But we had I managed to get a shirt done for Rob
Brilliant.
and New Zealand, and Jamaica have signed that, so I'm hoping to put some back in again and see if we can help some other people within the game.
That would be just brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Mark. Really appreciate it. And yes, commiserations to Jamaica, because we were talking about it on the programme yesterday as well. Have a fantastic day. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much for your support. Thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. Cheers, Mark. Brilliant stuff. What a great guy. It is 6:57. After the break, we'll speak to James Heal, whose book about Liz Truss, released today, went from a biography to a political obituary in 7 weeks.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Suella Braverman insists she's the victim of a political witch hunt as she defends her record as Home Secretary.
Good morning. It is 7 o'clock on Tuesday, the 1st of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Rosie Wright and Paul Hawkins.
Well, here's what's leading the news this morning. The Home Secretary's claimed she's not to blame for the crisis at the Manston Refugee Centre as she fights to remain in her job. Speaking in the Commons last night, she also addressed her handling of classified Home Office documents, accusing her critics of launching a witch hunt.
The PM and the Chancellor are reportedly drawing up plans for major tax hikes in an effort to fill a £50 billion fiscal hole left by Liz Truss. The rises are expected to be announced in the autumn statement on the 17th of November.
And the star of The Crown, Elizabeth Debicki, who plays Princess Diana, has urged critics of the controversial show to move on. What she said, she hoped people would stop attacking the series now that a disclaimer's been added to the trailer.
Talking a lot about Suella Braverman and what she had to say in the Commons yesterday. A lot of you getting in touch. Dawn says the working class people of this country are fed up of people knocking the Home Secretary. I myself am supporting her. She is doing what we want.
And good morning to Paddy, who says Suella Braverman hit the nail on the head. Pretty went from disaster to another. She's obviously hit a raw nerve. We are being invaded. There are no other words.
GB Views at gbnews.uk or at GB News.
So welcome to the programme. To our top story, Suella Braverman has said she's the victim of a political witch hunt as she defends her record as Home Secretary.
Speaking in the Commons last night to address both the migrant crisis and her own handling of sensitive Home Office documents. She said mistakes had been made, but she wouldn't apologise for things she hadn't done.
Addressing the Manston crisis, the Home Secretary said she was not to blame, claiming she'd never blocked the use of hotels to ease pressure on the processing centre there.
She also described the influx of migrants as an invasion.
The British people deserve to know which party is serious about stopping the invasion on our southern coast and which party is not.
Well, let's find out more and speak now to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. A very good morning to you, Darren. So a fairly explosive session in the House of Commons yesterday where the Home Secretary is defending her case on two fronts.
Yeah, two fronts indeed, Rosie. Let's deal with one of them first of all. Clearly what is happening at those processing plants in Dover and at Manston that we've seen over the last couple of days. Now, there has been an attempt to try and improve things there. We know that the processing centre in Dover is now fully reopened following that attack on Sunday, and that they are trying to get numbers down in Manston. Now, we didn't see anyone arrive here in the UK across the English Channel yesterday. That would have eased, again, those numbers. Why is that important? Well, fundamentally, the conditions at these processing centres are meant to be pretty good, and they have been relatively good up until recently. People aren't meant to spend more than 24, 48 hours there. They are literally processing plants to move people on. Now, there has been big problems with, let's say, in Manston, only 1,500 people maximum meant to be there. We've seen numbers up to 4,000 in recent days, including people who've not just been there for days, but in some cases up to 5 weeks. Now, what's the allegation against the Home Secretary here is there have been reports emanating from inside the Home Office that she has been part of the problem, that she deliberately stopped hotel rooms being blocked, which then added to the backlog at those processing sites in Kent. Now, she vehemently denied that repeatedly in the Commons yesterday, and I do think if, and obviously it's a big if, we have to believe what the Home Secretary has said in Commons, but if it was ever found that she hadn't done that, she'd done the opposite of what she said in the Commons, I mean, she would be toast, if you like. But there is these big questions about the small boats crisis. I think everyone across the benches recognises it is fundamentally a problem. There's no doubt about that. It was quite extraordinary, though, to hear the Home Secretary yesterday essentially dump on not just Priti Patel, the previous Home Secretary, who must have been chucking bricks at the television watching it yesterday, but indeed 12 years of Conservative government. She was essentially saying the whole process is broken, it is a mess, it is not working. Frankly, though, of course, it has been the Conservative Party who've been in power, in control of immigration for the last 12 years. And then controversy as well, as you say, around this word of invasion. Now, clearly, her and many of her supporters, and I'm sure some viewers at home would like to use that wartime term. For others, it is a complete exaggeration and potentially an incendiary term, given what we saw in Dover at the weekend. So it's not a surprise that the use of that word has caused division and sparked debate, though that is precisely what the Home Secretary wanted to achieve by using it. And then just very quickly and finally, on the second big issue facing the Home Secretary, which is the use of her personal emails. Now, we all know she did it. She admitted a mistake. Her argument is that we all need to move on. They weren't controversial documents. Yes, it may have been a break into the ministerial code, but she will not do it again. I think for her critics, they are determined to prove that her version of events is not necessarily the version of events that happened in the end, and they would argue that breaking the ministerial code not just once but 6 times means that you're unfit for the job.
Darren, thank you for that. That's our political editor at Downing Street, Darren McCaffrey. Also joining us now is the diary editor of The Spectator and co-author of Out of the Blue, the inside story of the unexpected rise and rapid fall, there it is, of Liz Truss. James Hill, very good morning to you. We'll talk about that book, which must be a fascinating read in itself, given she's the shortest-serving Prime Minister ever, in just a moment. But first of all, Suella Braverman, you can see why Rishi Sunak brought her into the cabinet to satisfy that part of the Conservative Party, but it's proving a tricky appointment for him.
It is, particularly when he stood on the steps of Downing Street and he said he promised accountability and professionalism. And of course, the opposition can turn around and say, well, hang on a sec, we've got someone here who just 6 days ago resigned over issues about breaking the ministerial code, and now she's back straight away. So there's questions about the judgment hanging over from that case. And now, of course, there's an issue of competence as well and what's going on at the Home Office. It's not fair, obviously, to blame all this on her. She's just been in the job only a few weeks, but clearly it's a long-standing issue here. And as we saw in the House of Commons yesterday, there's a ratcheting up of the rhetoric and an escalation here in order to show the sentiments of both sides of the House. But are there going to be the solutions, the policy solutions, in order to try and fix these issues?
Yeah. She said, the system's broken. Some might say, well, the way you've behaved means you don't have the authority to be the person to fix it.
Well, this is always the issue, right? When you have an issue about someone's personality and their personal conduct as well as the policy issue, and the issue, they get conflated together. And I think that's what we're seeing now. I think there's a lot of truth in some of the criticism she's been making about the Home Office and the immigration and the asylum system. They were obviously designed a long time ago. We've got new issues coming up here. But also, then there's people say, hang on a sec, are we supposed to put our trust in you, someone who it's been shown can't even be trusted with secure documents, etc., or written ministerial statements? And that leads into questions about personality, and then you get trying to bog down on these issues, and solving them is very difficult.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but she said she's going to fix this problem, right? Maybe I missed this, but did she actually say how she's going to fix this yesterday?
Well, no, this is the issue in terms of what can actually be done in solving this. And I think other than more resources, which at a time of government cuts, as we've been discussing earlier today, is going to be very difficult. There's things, for instance, that might be done in government, like, British Bill of Rights, which Dominic Raab might be discussing. But of course, can that get done this side of an election? You've got a very divided party. We've already seen Sir Roger Gale going out on the news rounds and saying, criticising this. So can anything get through the Commons when the majority is so fragile as it is?
Her main defence, really, is, look, I'm the victim of a witch hunt. Do you think that's fair?
Well, look, I think there's always a degree of opportunism in what the opposition does, but that's their job. And I think, you can argue about the severity of what was done when you're sending these documents to someone else. But I think that, witch hunt is perhaps a little bit far. And I think, she probably admit herself in the candour of her moments that, she is to some extent responsible for what's happened. Yeah,
and we shouldn't forget there are a significant number of people that approve of the appointment of Suella Braverman, not just within the Conservative Party, but we hear a lot of our viewers get in touch with us. They think she's the right person for the job. Jeff in Lancashire says, just for the record, everyone I've spoken to agrees with Suella being Home Secretary and the stand she's taking. Now, Jeff in Lancashire, I'm sure, is very popular. He probably hasn't spoken to everyone in the country, but there is a significant number of people who do like the way she talks.
I quite agree, and I think that if you look at the actual public view on immigration, it's probably to the right of both parties on this. And the difficulty is, I think what she's saying is a lot of people agree with. The question is, can you get the practical policy solutions? And the danger is we have this ratcheting up of rhetoric, which you can argue about either way. But the point is it going to be matched by tough measures? And the problem is you've now got an immigration and asylum system which can't match what she wants to do, and it's going to be very difficult to find a policy solution to match what she's saying.
And the gap is disappointment.
Exactly, and that's when resentment starts to fester and the Tories will lose votes, and that's the problem.
Suella Braverman will be hoping that her tenure will be longer than that of Liz Truss. Just talk us through what your last few weeks have been like. I'm assuming a furious rewrite of a book that was supposed to be about the rapid rise of Liz Truss and then actually culminated in a very quick descent.
Yes. Well, I think the most surreal moment was when Sir Keir Starmer stood up at Prime Minister's Questions and said, it's going to be out for Christmas. Is that the title or the release date? It's been a strange old time. Funnily enough, there's been a bit of rewrites at the end, obviously, and trying to talk to people about what went on in those final days in the Downing Street bunker. But also, the clues were always there throughout her career. She's someone who is quite, high energetic, who likes to go out there and be quite, personalising her brand, etc. And I think those things have a lot of merit at certain points. But I think as Prime Minister, the problem is all those levers can sometimes be more of a trapdoor when you pull them.
Yeah, and let's just be clear, you decided to write this book years ago?
No? August
in August, right, OK, and you thought,
terms,
and it includes her time serving as Foreign Secretary, those kind of things as well. It's not just purely about the 45 days as Prime Minister, is it?
No, I'm not, even though they were very eventful, I'm not sure we could get 300 pages out of 45 days. It was a full life, from, growing up in Leeds, etc., her 10 years as Minister, all the rise to the top. So you've got a very steady rise, and then, of course, a very sudden fall. So I think trying to take, everyone wants focus on the fall, but equally the rise is quite instructive in Westminster politics as well.
Yeah.
Lots of people think Liz Truss truly believed that she could have done the job and maybe going through a bit of an identity crisis now that she got into that position finally, having spent years of thinking, I can do a better job of this, and it turned out she couldn't at all.
I think that, Liz Truss is someone who you don't get to that position without having a real sort of self-belief, and she's always been, you can see this from her days, as a schoolgirl in Leeds, quite, individualistic in terms of her thinking, going to think outside of the box. And I think that, she's someone, what you saw on those, when she said her resignation speech, effectively the sentiment was, at least we tried. And I think she will feel a little bit vindicated in that at least she gave it a try and trying to go for some of these growth measures. Obviously, she'll be hurting from what's happened, but I think that, she is someone who knows her own mind and will be glad she gave it a try, at least, because that's how she's seen herself throughout her career, as someone who can, a bit of an iconoclast, breaking down barriers, etc. So we will see if she can make any kind of comeback after this.
Do you think there's even a tiny chance that she could end up back in a cabinet sometime soon?
There is perhaps a path. I think it's very unlikely, don't get me wrong, a path whereby you think after the next election the Tories lose loads of seats, she's in a safe seat in South West Norfolk.
Yeah.
There could be some kind of front bench role. We will see.
Yeah, that would be fascinating. So it's out in time for Christmas in all good bookshops, yeah?
It is, yep.
Yeah, and bad ones.
Take all
It's
the
everywhere.
Yeah,
exactly.
Can't escape us.
James, really good to have your thoughts this morning. Thank you. James Hill from The Spectator there, who's the author of Out of the Blue.
And do keep your views coming in, particularly around the language that Suella Braverman's used. And when she says she's going to fix the problem, well, how? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Well, speaking in the Commons last night, she also highlighted the issue of Albanian criminal gangs.
This year has seen a surge in the number of Albanian arrivals, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many of them, I'm afraid to say, abusing our modern slavery laws. We are working to ensure Albanian cases are processed and individuals are removed as swiftly as possible, sometimes within days. The Rwanda Partnership will further disrupt the business model of the smuggling gangs and deter migrants from putting their lives at risk. I'm committed to making that partnership work.
So let's get some more on these Albanian criminal gangs. They're on the rise in the UK and shipping hundreds of millions of pounds in criminal proceeds back to their home country each year.
Well, that's what official sources have told GB News. They say much of the surge in Albanians arriving across the English Channel on small boats is being orchestrated specifically by those gangs.
And many are being used to manage cannabis farms across the UK, as Albanian criminals have now taken over control of most of the country's cannabis trade, dominated previously by Vietnamese gangs. Our Home and Security editor Mark White has this exclusive report.
Albanian gangs are the dominant force in organised crime across the UK. We've been told that Albanian crime groups are shipping hundreds of millions of pounds in criminal proceeds back to Albania every year. A number of different businesses, like car washes and barber shops, are often used to launder the proceeds of crime. But in truth, the vast majority of the money they make from their criminal endeavours is simply carried back to Albania by hand or in vehicles. Recently, border officials seized £300,000 bound for Albania in luggage at a UK airport. In another incident, £500,000 was found hidden inside a van at a UK port. Albanian crime gangs now control the majority of cannabis farms across the UK. They've taken over much of the cannabis cultivation trade from Vietnamese crime groups, with most of the Albanian cannabis farms concentrated in the north. But in pretty much every part of the country, you'll find Albanians are the dominant group involved in cannabis cultivation, as we found out recently in Suffolk. Is this what you're seeing time and again increasingly now, like other forces, that the Albanian organised criminal gangs are moving into these areas?
No, they are. They certainly seem to be on the up. They seem the dominant ones at the moment.
The trade in cannabis is largely self-contained amongst Albanian criminals here, with less control from crime bosses in their home country. In the south, they still control most of the cocaine trade, which is largely overseen by crime lords back in Albania. Across the UK, there has been a number of recent arrests of Albanians suspected of involvement in cross-channel people smuggling. Much of the surge in Albanians arriving by small boats lately is, we're told, being orchestrated by Albanian criminal gangs who want those people to work for them. Most of the people smuggling trade is still being controlled by Kurdish criminal gangs, but they are increasingly working in tandem with Albanian crime groups who are advertising and arranging for people from the Western Balkan nation to head for northwest France before handing them over to the Kurdish gangmasters. Social media is a massive tool the Albanians have been using to good effect to attract their fellow countrymen and women. We've learned that the National Crime Agency has persuaded social media companies to remove 1,700 such videos in recent months. But for every one they delete, many more pop up, persuading Albanians to cross the channel and enter the UK's illegal economy.
Right now, it is coming up to 17 minutes past 7. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories making headlines. And the International Trade Secretary says the UK must future-proof its economy by investing in green tech. In a speech in Newcastle later today, Kemi Badenoch's expected to highlight new technologies to combat climate change and how they could create high-paid skilled jobs and energy security.
The Northern Ireland Secretary will hold talks with Stormont leaders later today. There is uncertainty over whether he will call an election. Chris Eaton-Harris didn't set a date for a new poll last Friday, despite indicating he would.
Collins Dictionary has announced that permacrisis is the word of the year. The word describes an extended period of instability and insecurity. Well, the Collins Dictionary say there's been increasing usage of the word due to the ongoing crises in the UK and across the world. What morning to Kevin, who says the word I've chosen for the year, simply because it's so overused and drives me mad, is catastrophic. It's so exaggerated and was used too much by the media.
Yeah, nice one, Kevin. This word in the Collins Dictionary, there's lots of predictable words: Kyiv, Partygate, lawfare, sports washing. The one I like that apparently is common, I've never heard of it. It relates to animals stretching themselves out in order to cool down. Do you know what the word is?
How can that be in the top 10 words of the year?
I know.
When would you use that word?
When you see an animal stretching themselves out in order to cool down, it is splooting.
Splooting? Which animal would do that?
Well, no.
Cool down.
Well, you see dogs and cats. They stretch out and then they kind of flop over on a hard, cold surface to cool down instead of the carpet. Apparently,
do you like to do any more animal
your pet, if you've got an animal, if you've got a dog or cat. Or indeed any animal, they are splooting when they're too hot, and so they stretch out in order to cool down. Never heard that word.
They're talking about like new words that we're using as well, rather than like the most 10 popular ones, I think.
Well, yeah. So actually, to be fair, yes, it's word of the year, but not words that everyone are using.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's ever
establishment stitch-up. Anyway, splooting on. You sploot.
19 minutes past 7. If you've got your own pitch for what should be the word of the year, then let us know. We are really looking for some positive ones.
Or even made-up words. Words that you make up at home that maybe you only have in your family, like splooting.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that would be a great one.
Some people have their own words.
We've been talking a lot about words and language use this morning as well, and more on that to come. But for now, let's move on. The Independent Monitoring Authority, which monitors the rights of EU citizens, is taking the Home Office to court, claiming that almost 3 million EU citizens are at risk of losing their right to remain in the UK.
EU citizens who had lived here for less than 5 years before Brexit are at risk and could even face deportation.
Well, General Counsel of the Independent Monitoring Authority, Rhys Davis, joins us for more. Can you just explain to us then this legal complexity? What's happened and how could it impact those 3 million people?
So, good morning. As you mentioned, under the EU settlement scheme designed by the UK government, those who have less than 5 years residence in the UK are being granted a temporary right to residence in the UK, which will expire after 5 years. Now, if they fail then to make a second application by the end of that 5-year period, they will lose their rights irretrievably, which will mean that they will lose their right to work in the UK, they will lose their right to live in the UK. We feel that that is not permitted under the withdrawal agreement. We feel that a single application is all that is needed, and that is why we have decided to bring the matter to the court to seek clarity for those over 2 million individuals who hold pre-settled status, so that they know exactly where they stand.
If they do decide to, I mean, having to submit a second application, is that not just a little bit of extra paperwork, a little bit more time? It might cost them a few quid, but ultimately that it will be approved, and it won't mean that they can't stay in the UK.
I think for us, crucially, that the key fact is that the loss of rights. That the agreements provide for a limited set of circumstances within which an individual can lose their rights. That may be a long absence from the UK, for example. However, what it doesn't allow is for individuals who fail to make that second application to lose their rights irretrievably if they fail to make that second application.
Reece, thank you very much for just talking us through some of the complexities. General Counsel of the Independent Monitoring Authority, appreciate your time. After the break, we'll have all the big sploots stories with Paul Coit splooting along at the last game of the Champions League. And you may also be talking about the cricket as well. Because England are playing Australia, actually, in a bit, in half an hour, at the T20 World Cup. Not Australia, New Zealand, sorry. England are playing New Zealand. Anyway, Paul... That's why Paul Coit will be bringing us the details.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back, 26 minutes past 7. You're with Breakfast on GB News. Lots to come on our programme. At 8:15, Vanity Fair Royal Editor Katie Nicholl will be here talking about The Crown, as the show's stars have said they think it's time for us to just say, it's drama. Let's get on with it.
It's not real. And at 8:20 we'll be in Lincolnshire, where one of the last remaining Lancaster bombers is launching the Royal British Legion's poppy appeal. Looking forward to that.
And please keep your views coming in. Lots of you have got something to say about Suella Braverman. Rich says, because Suella Braverman used the language, he said we were being invaded. Rich, good morning. He says we're being invaded. There's no doubt. We don't need a cross-party solution to this problem. Would the Labour Party have a better way of resolving it?
Yeah, Kelvin says, of course, those ejected by a lettuce-supporting group members will agree it is an invasion. They also like those weird phrases like anti-growth coalition, as if the hopeless Tory party itself is some sort of growth. What do you think about what Kelvin had to say? GB Views at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GB News.
Well, let's turn our attention to the sport. Paul Coit joins us in the studio to talk us through the latest and biggest sports stories. Paul,
morning.
Shall we start with cricket?
We can start with cricket. I've got to be honest with you, I've got a nervous day ahead of me. As far as sport is concerned, we've got cricket, England in the T20. Spurs are playing Marseille, which they have to win in the Champions League. So cricket today, must win for England. T20 gets underway pretty soon, so it starts this morning. Already lost to Ireland, which was a real surprise, which wasn't expected. With all respect to Ireland, you'd expect England to actually win that quite easily because we're the favourites.
We said on that day, we went, yeah, you would have thought they'll win that. We did that.
This is after one innings, and we go,
they'll chase that down. And then about an hour and a half later, I left and I logged on. Well, we cursed that.
I know, we did curse that. So what do we say then? New Zealand should win that. Should we say that instead?
Yes, New Zealand should win that.
So Ireland then win, and then we were down to play Australia last Friday, and that was rained off, and that would have been huge at the MCG, the Melbourne Cricket Ground. We expected 100,000 people there, but the rain came down, so then that means just a point each. So the way things go, it's the Super 12s at the moment, and out of all the 12, only 4 will go through to a semi-final and then a final. So we need to finish in the top 2 of our group. So today is New Zealand, who are playing extremely well. I think, to be honest with you, I'd look at them as favourites at the moment.
Yeah.
So we need to beat New Zealand.
Them, and then, is it not Afghanistan? Who is it?
Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka. We've got to beat New Zealand and Sri Lanka to stay in, basically.
Yeah.
In the tournament that we're favourites to win.
Yes. And because of Ireland and because of the other one, it's just the way it goes.
And then later on in the football, you want Spurs have a must-win. So it's must-wins everywhere.
It's must-wins everywhere. And I'm just worried about a lose all round. But as far as the Champions League is concerned, the Champions League, so most of them are dead rubbers, actually, to be honest with you. Which means that Liverpool are playing Napoli. Liverpool, if they win, they'll finish the top of their group. They've already qualified, so they're fine to go into the last 16, which is not until February. Rangers play Ajax. So as far as Rangers are concerned, they currently look like they could be the worst performance ever in a group stage of the Champions League. But if they manage to beat Ajax and score more than 5, which, let's face it, is not going to happen, we'll be honest with you, then they will qualify for the Europa, but it doesn't look good for them. But the huge game then is at the Stade Velodrome in Marseille. It's a cauldron of a stadium. It's going to be an atmosphere like you wouldn't know, and Spurs are going in there. And whether the form is indifferent, it's hard to say. They probably should have qualified last week with a last-minute goal that was actually chalked off with VAR. We've got Antonio Conte got sent off, complaining about it, so he's actually going to be banished to the stand. So all bets are off. We'll have to see what happens. But it's going to be a huge, huge game tonight. And I'm a little shaky about the whole thing.
Should we look at the world?
It's not long to go.
It's true.
I'd rather not talk about it. Can we not talk about it because it makes me too nervous?
Let's talk about the World Cup instead.
Let's talk about the World Cup.
The Ukrainian FA don't want Iran to play. I think we can understand why. What's going to happen?
Well, they've put a complaint in to FIFA to say that Iran should be kicked out of the World Cup. Now, Iran are in England's group. So in England's group in the World Cup is the USA and there's Wales and there's Iran. And Iran have never played England, I believe, in the World Cup. So Iran are there. They qualified, but Ukraine are saying that they've actually supplied weapons to Russia to fight against them. And they are using UN Security Council resolutions. So this is going to... And they say it's Resolution 2231, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Paul.
Yeah,
and basically, they cannot... They're saying that they should not be involved in the World Cup. And then this is the interesting one. They also say, this is what the Ukraine FAA... And they're not actually saying, we should be in, but they're saying that Iran should not be involved in the World Cup. They shouldn't be allowed to take part. So we're only 3 weeks away. So they've also said that they're in breach of Article 3 and 4 of FIFA statutes. Now, the irony of those statutes, for me, it commits FIFA to respect human rights and discrimination, whereas the irony is, of course, we have the World Cup in Qatar. So do we think that FIFA can actually look at that and go, in that case, we agree and we will throw Iran out? I think it's a pipe dream. I can't see that FIFA will do it.
Yeah.
So
it's about making a political point, really, rather than really thinking you're going to change anything.
I think so. And whether it is, I mean, I'm sure Ukraine would think, we do want to do something about it. It'd be great if Iran should be kicked out, but I don't think FIFA would make such a step. And also who would then take their place? I don't think it's likely to be Ukraine. If it did happen, in the unlikely event that it did happen, they'd probably be looking for another country from the Middle East, maybe the UAE, that would then take their place. But to be honest with you, I think you're right. Making a point, very important, but if FIFA are going to do anything about it, I would be very...
Are you going to the World Cup in Qatar?
I am not going to the World Cup, but I will. Are you going to the World Cup in Qatar?
I might be, yeah.
OK.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
We're only 3 weeks away now.
Yeah,
well,
I know.
3 weeks away.
I know. How's your Arabic?
Excellent.
Yeah?
Excellent. Absolutely perfect. Do you want some help with that?
Yeah, later.
OK.
All right. Paul, thank you very much for that. Paul Coit there with all the latest sport and looking ahead to the World Cup, which is in 3 weeks' time.
7:33 now. After the break, we're going to be going through the papers. Joining us to do that is the former Home Office Minister, Norman Baker, and the broadcast editor of The Spectator, Cindy Yu.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Welcome back. It is 7:36. Good to have you with us this morning. Let's bring you up to date with our top stories then. The Home Secretary vowing to fix the UK's broken asylum system. It comes after Suella Braverman rejected calls to resign over her response to the migrant crisis. There are thought to be around 4,000 migrants at the processing facility in Manston, which is designed to hold a maximum of 1,600.
People could face tax rises for years to come. Rishi Sunak is looking at how he can address that black hole of up to £50 billion in the public finances. The Daily Telegraph are reporting that the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, will attempt to fill the shortfall through a combination of 50% tax rises and 50% public spending cuts.
Farmers have warned of the potential impact on the supply of turkeys this Christmas amid the UK's largest outbreak of bird flu. They say the current situation is unbelievably bad and represents the foot and mouth of the poultry industry. It comes as bird keepers in England will be required to house their poultry indoors to tackle the spread of avian influenza.
Well, let's take a look through the papers now. Joining us in the studio is the former Liberal Democratic Minister, Norman Baker, and broadcast editor of The Spectator, Cindy Yu. Cindy, let's start with you if we can. We just mentioned it in our roundup of the news there. Bird flu, the Times have got a feature on it, page 15, talking not about just our turkeys, but also free-range eggs.
Yeah, absolutely. Free-range eggs will be under threat if, they have to go ahead with putting birds indoors, which is the advice at the moment to prevent bird flu from spreading anymore. And it does seem like a very serious situation, actually, because since bird flu was detected a year ago, there have been over 200 cases, but 82 of those cases happened this month. So it's a massive ramp-up of infections here. And the government says that we shouldn't be worrying about turkeys. I mean, I don't know about you, I didn't really eat turkey at Christmas anyway.
I was thinking that, yeah.
But eggs I do eat, and I think if free-range, it basically goes to show the kind of impact on the whole supply chains, and the ecosystem or the supermarket.
Norman, turkeys, are you fussed if there's no turkey on your plate? Or even for that matter, I was thinking the goose, duck, they would all be off the menu.
I'm not fussed because I haven't eaten meat since 1984, so I'm fine.
Oh, fine. So you'll be all right then.
I will.
Rice will still be there.
Yeah, OK. But still, no eggs.
Well, I do eat eggs. But the reason I stopped eating meat was actually for animal welfare reasons, because the way animals are kept in confined spaces, huge numbers, I didn't like very much. That's part of the reason we got avian flu, I think, or why it spread so quickly.
Let's talk about COP if we can, because last week, if we remember, the message was very clear. Rishi Sunak had to focus on domestic issues. He wouldn't be going. Yesterday, we got the impression, didn't we, Norman, that we were being softened up for a U-turn?
Yes, well, there's a lot of people in his own party who've been unhappy with the suggestion he wouldn't go. I mean, Alex Sharma did a good job, actually, at COP26. For this country and for the world, really, in terms of getting Britain in the right position on climate change. And the danger is that could be all thrown away if Britain descends a sort of second-rate delegation across to COP27. So he's under pressure from everybody, really, in his own party and opposition as well, to go. He says he might go. It's under review. It'll depend on how busy he is with Jeremy Hunt and the budget, which I understand is a reasonable excuse in a way. However, what's not been said is why can't King Charles go? King Charles wants to go, quite clearly. He's been, it's the palace, I think, has been briefing in the papers that he wants to go. And there's no suggestion that he's going to be allowed to go. Well, why not? I mean, he's an international statesman as far as climate change is concerned, and he would be useful for us in that meeting, useful for Britain, in that meeting, but also useful for the world. So if Rishi Sunak can't go, why can't the King go?
Would it not be constitutionally problematic for him to go? I thought he was stepping back from a lot of these issues.
If he's under instructions from the he will do what he's told by the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister says you should go, then he should go, and he can be given messages to give out. He can operate within Foreign Office guidelines. No reason why he shouldn't go.
Yeah.
What do you think? Lots of people have said, does he have to go in person? Can he sort of interact with this virtually? We're used to all working from home. Is it the same?
Yeah, I think he could have made a statement, some kind of virtual statement, as you suggest. I think the problem here is not going. The problem here is that it makes Rishi Sunak look weak and indecisive, because now he's saying that he will go in the face of pressure. And this is the kind of stuff that Liz Truss was lambasted for, that, you'll make a big, bold decision, and then as soon as pressure happens, you are then changing your mind on what to do. And this is Rishi Sunak's second week as Prime Minister. Having decided this, if he's not going to go, I agree with Norman, it would have helped the situation if he said, I can't possibly go, but, this is our greatest diplomatic weapon, King Charles, let's send him. If he's not going to do that, and then he's going to U-turn and then end up going because of pressure, it does just look a bit weak from the new Prime Minister.
Yeah. Is connected to this something that hasn't been mentioned, which is the announcement about a coal mine in Cumbria. The decision is due on November the 8th, next Tuesday, about whether the government will open that, Britain's first new deep coal mine for 30 years. The optics of that, which it will be used for coking coal for the steel industry, they would have to make a decision on that and then decide. Because if they haven't decided and he goes to COP27 and then they decide to open this coal mine, which is still not, that still waits to be seen.
Yes.
The optics of that would be difficult.
It would be difficult, but I mean, he's talking about granting licences for oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. So, I mean, in a sense, that's the same thing. It's more fossil fuels, which is unhelpful, I think. And actually, it doesn't make any economic sense, because the economics of renewable energy these days are so favourable that it doesn't make any sense to spend money on fossil fuel anyway.
Let's continue sort of in the vein of the climate, if we can, and look at The Guardian, the front page, Norman. We have a new president in Brazil who's pledged to honour the campaigns of people who've been saying we need to save and restore the rainforest.
Yes, and it's interesting, isn't it, that on a very close election, that the world has piled in from Joe Biden through Rishi Sunak and everybody else to congratulate, even Vladimir Putin, to congratulate the new successful president of Brazil, Lula, who's on an amazing return to power, actually, after having been subject to allegations of corruption and everything else. And everybody's very pleased he's there, because Bolsonaro is such a ghastly man, to be honest with you, not just in terms of how he treats his own population, which is quite shocking, his cavalier attitude towards gun control, but also, of course, most significantly for us in the West, the destruction of the rainforest, which he's been keen to accelerate for some reason. He seems to want to see the rainforest cut down and see some sort of massive achievement if he does that. And Lula is going to protect the rainforest. In his previous time as president, we saw, in fact, that the rainforest destruction was minimised, or at least lessened under him. So, hooray, a bit of good news.
Yeah, Cindy, moving on, The Express, page 24. Matthew Perry, the one where my friends tried to save me. This is Matthew Perry from the sitcom Friends.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys are Friends fans, but I mean, I certainly watched it a lot when it was on. And what's amazing about this story is that Matthew Perry, whose life has been spent on screen in this long-running sitcom, was actually battling an addiction, first to alcohol and then to opioids and then to alcohol again, went into numerous rehabs on screen. And that, I just find that incredible. And he mentions, you can see between seasons where at the end of a season and the beginning of a season, he's meant to look the same because they've just left off at the same time. But you can see where he says when he's skinny, he's addicted to opioids. When he's fat, he's addicted to alcohol. And it's just, I always find these kind of celebrity stories interesting, not because, of some kind of schadenfreude, but it just goes to show that addiction can really affect anyone and everyone. Happiness doesn't come from success or fame or whatever it is. He thought that this is what he wanted.
Well, they were the absolute pinnacle of success, and he speaks about the fact that he just couldn't even enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually, having read some extract off the book, Serialising Papers, I think it's actually been very well written. I don't know if he wrote it himself or was a ghostwriter, but it was actually a very fascinating read. And also he writes about other things like going out with Julia Roberts, which is always fun for a certain kind of generation. But yeah, no, so I just find it so fascinating that fame and success doesn't kind of bring that kind of thing. And this is at the time, a young man's way to find that out.
Our producer's just telling us, apparently no ghostwriter, so he wrote it himself.
Right.
The other thing that's quite interesting is that he does say, I think it's Jennifer Aniston at some points, do try to step in and say, like, you really need some help here.
Yeah, apparently they could smell the alcohol on him on set. And sometimes he would fall asleep in between lines and his co-stars had to nudge him awake. So we wasn't doing a good job, but no, we didn't know about this.
Yeah.
You know, when we were watching the show, we couldn't...
And addiction is such a problem for so many people. It's important that he's talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Should we look at The Guardian, Norman, and BBC Local Radio? Of course, the licence fee, that's a big question mark coming up. And, you know, the broadcaster's got to look at where they can cut costs, and it looks like local radio is in some parts on the chopping block.
Well, I just find this terribly sad because BBC Local Radio is actually very important. I mean, how do you get your local news unless it's from the BBC? Because ITV abandoned that years ago, effectively. And what they're talking about here is cutting another 48 jobs and having shared stations after 2 o'clock in the afternoon so that BBC Sussex and BBC Surrey or someone will merge. That's not local radio, that's regional radio. It's not worth having. You want local radio in your own patch. You want to listen to the news, the traffic news. This is how you gauge it. And you want to be able to recognise the road they're talking about. And if it's talking about some road miles away, then that's not local radio. So this is very sad. It's kind of the slow death of local radio on BBC, which it doesn't save much money. I mean, BBC Local Radio is already held together with sticky back plastic and, kind of string. There's nothing there anyway.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge, though, for the BBC. How do they come to terms with the fact that they're going to have far less money coming in and this big question mark as to whether people are prepared to pay the licence fee?
Well, there is a debate about that, clearly, and if you look forward to the decision about the licence fee, then my view is you probably do need to keep the licence fee because it's not a sensible alternative. The BBC has to have a certain percentage of the viewing population to justify its existence, and once you move away from the licence fee, then the amount of money that the BBC will get will probably decrease, and then they'll start cutting the programmes that actually the BBC needs to be producing, the expensive programmes that no one else will do. And if that happens, then the BBC just becomes like anybody else, and we lose an institution. They're 100 years old this year, the BBC, and I have to say they're not in a good state.
Yeah, well, one would argue that, or maybe even within BBC management, they will have calculated that in going for younger audiences, which they need to do to keep that audience share, getting the audience for local radio tends to be older anyway.
It does, but local radio costs, in the BBC terms, almost nothing. Probably, one or two of the sports personalities they pay for on the football coverage would cover the BBC local radio bill.
Yeah.
Cindy, is it value for money?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I've never worked for the BBC, but I do feel like the media environment that we have now, where we've got newcomers like GB News, Talk TV, The Spectator itself has a YouTube show which is modelled on some TV talk shows. It's a good environment to have this kind of competition. You've got viewers watching this right now in the morning rather than BBC because they find the BBC is not really what they want to consume. And I think if that's not what they want to consume, the licence fee shouldn't necessarily be mandatory for those people. And when it comes to local radio, I do wonder if it's just a kind of a dying medium. I mean, people don't get the news from that kind of sources anymore.
Actually, they get it from ultra local radio. I mean, I have to say, quick plug now because I have 3 programmes a week on my local FM station, Sea Haven FM, music programmes, and people do listen to Sea Haven FM and other local stations which are ultra local for the local news in their town. But the BBC is neither fish nor fowl. This kind of regional approach is useless.
I have to say, I've worked in local radio and BBC Local Radio, and the effort that you go to try and find stories in your patch to make sure that you're actually telling the people who are tuning into BBC Cambridgeshire, whoever it might be, actually get the information that's relevant to them.
And just to give you an idea of how local the news can get, I once did a story about a swan running into the road.
But there's actually...
What a great story that was.
I can imagine it was. But for the Ofcom licence...
Cars had to swerve for it. And hang on, this is a very good story. The swan went into the road and the traffic had to swerve around. This was in West London. Big story at the time.
You're really selling
I'm wondering you're doing a
local radio
disservice to what they're doing. Because to have the Ofcom licence in your local area, you have to do local stories. So embedded into having the licence, you've got to tell the stories of the local area.
Yeah.
Norman and Cindy, thank you both very much. You'll rejoin us in the next hour to go through the papers in some more detail. Right now, it is 10 minutes to 8, and the spotlight remains on the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, this morning. Labour are eager to not let the public forget about, though, the online safety bill, which was delayed once again last week.
Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell claims the cost of the delay in the 5 years since the bill was first promised has led to rampant disinformation and online abuse.
Well, Lucy joins us now for more. Thank you very much for your time. Just explain your concerns about the delay of this bill.
Well, every day, every week that passes, we're seeing more online hate on crime, more online scammers, more disinformation being pushed. We're seeing, unfortunately, the sort of terrible toll of teenagers taking their own life or committing self-harm, as we saw in the case of Molly Russell and the coroner's findings there in terms of the role of social media. So this bill, which has been many, many years in the making, it's been discussed at length in Parliament and elsewhere. It was at its very final stages before the summer when it got pulled. The government then promised us it would come back. It was then pulled again. It was supposed to be in the House of Commons today. It was pulled again. And we are really concerned that unless this bill now comes back before Christmas, it could get scuppered altogether. And that's advice that I've received, but it's also advice that the Secretary of State has received, and there are real costs to this delay.
There seems like a lot of cross-party cooperation to try and push this bill through the Commons. At the moment, I know that you've struck up a bit of solidarity, unusually, with Nadine Dorries.
Well, absolutely, and to be fair with the new Secretary of State as well. To be fair to Nadine Dorries, she gritted her teeth and she got this bill through most of its stages in Parliament, even though it is not without some controversy. It's not the perfect bill. It wouldn't be my perfect bill. It's not my bill. But in the interest of keeping people safe online, particularly teenagers and young people, we want to see this bill on the statute book as quickly as possible. And that's why I'm setting aside some of my criticisms in order to try and work with the government to get this done. But they really do need now to meet me halfway and actually bring back the bill so that we can do the very, very final stages of it, get it through the Commons before Christmas and into the Lords before the entire bill potentially collapses next year because it's run out of time.
The concerns and the reason it's been delayed are over freedom of speech. How do you enshrine that and have the bill?
Well, look, what I've always said is that in this bill, it's really, the principles of it are about the duty of care and the business models and the impact of content, certain types of content on social media, not the content itself. So let's take the case of Molly Russell. It wasn't just that she searched on one occasion herself for suicide material. Firstly, that search should have been a red flag. But then what happened, because of the engagement algorithms, the social media sites thought that she was interested in suicide material, so she was effectively bombarded with information about how to commit suicide and how to kill herself. And the coroner found that this absolutely contributed towards her taking her own life. And it's that business model, those engagement algorithms, that are the matter of regulation, not individual posts and individual bits of content. And we shouldn't lose sight of that core principle at the heart of this bill.
Lucy, moving on, we just wanted to ask you about what Suella Braverman had to say in the Commons yesterday, her use of the word invasion to describe the activity on the South Coast. I wanted to read to you this from Andy, who's got in touch with us this morning. He said, I believe that Suella was right in referring to the increase in migrants being an invasion. She is only calling it what it is, especially when the number of Albanians is considered. They have no right to be coming here whatsoever. Wasn't she just using language that a lot of people, a significant number of people, I should say, in everyday life use?
Well, look, the first thing I'd say is what I would agree with Suella Braverman about is that our immigration system is broken at the moment. Cases are not being decided upon quickly enough, and so people who are coming here, they're waiting months, if not years, before they're getting their decision taken, and that is clogging up the system. It's causing all these backlogs, and in many cases, actually encouraging criminal gangs to bring people over here because it takes such a long time for their cases to be processed that's an attractive situation. The use of the word invasion, I think, coming from a Home Secretary, who's responsible for our security services, is deeply irresponsible, because it was only the day before that we saw somebody firebombing a migrant centre and then killing themselves. So when you're responsible for the police and the security services, who will now be on heightened alert around these migrant centres because of the inflammatory nature of her comments and what we've seen over recent days, and you're the Home Secretary, I don't think that is the responsible thing to do, because you're also responsible for the police and the security services. But under this government's watch, this situation is now broken. We are seeing tens of thousands of people coming across the channel in small boats. Only a few years ago, that was less than a few hundred a year, and now it's tens of thousands. And it's this government's responsibility, it's this government's failings that has led to this situation getting as bad as it is today.
Lucy, if Labour were the government responsible, what policy would look different to solve the problem?
Well, look, we wouldn't be where we are today if Labour had been in government, and we saw that when we were last in government too. You've got to have much faster decision making, so that you can either send people back who have no right to stay in this country, or you can allow people here as genuine asylum seekers, and they can then are able to work, and they're not being housed in expensive hotels and so on, which is what we're seeing at the moment. We need to have an arrangement, a much better arrangement with the French, to deal with some of these problems further upstream and elsewhere further upstream, which we haven't done. And we need to do a lot more than this government have been doing in terms of outlawing the criminal gangs who are the ones pushing people in this way and who are facilitating these small boats coming across.
Just very quickly, in the short term, would you book more hotel rooms?
Well, I think obviously what's clear is that it's illegal for people to be held in these migrant centres for as long as they are. But the most important thing to deal with is the decision making. It has halved over the last few years, when people are now waiting for 2 years or more in some cases before they get a decision. They come across in a boat, they make an application, they're waiting 2 years. That process could be speeded up and should be speeded up much more quickly, so that we don't need to put people up in expensive hotels for long periods of time, which is what the taxpayer is currently paying for.
Lucy, thank you very much for your time, and particularly for sort of battling the weather to stand to talk to us as well. Really appreciate it.
It is 7:58, gbviews@gbnews.uk. If you want to feed back to us on what the Shadow Culture Secretary had to say there, stay with us, because there will be more on the crisis facing Suella Braverman after this break.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Braverman insists she is the victim of a political witch hunt as she defends her record as Home Secretary.
Well, a very good morning. It's just gone 8 o'clock on Tuesday, the 1st of November, and you're with Breakfast on GB News today with Paul and myself, Rosie. Well, here's what's leading the news.
The Home Secretary has claimed she is not to blame for the crisis at the Manston Refugee Centre as she fights to remain in her job. Speaking in the Commons last night, she also addressed her handling of classified Home Office documents, accusing her critics of launching a witch hunt.
The Prime Minister and the Chancellor are reportedly drawing up plans for major tax hikes in an effort to fill a £50 billion fiscal hole left by Liz Truss. Well, the rises are expected to be announced in the autumn statement that we're expecting to take place on the 17th of November.
And star of The Crown, Elizabeth Debicki, has urged critics of the controversial show to move on. The actress who portrays Princess Diana said she hoped people would stop attacking the series now that a disclaimer has been added to the trailer.
Well, please do continue to get in touch. Barry, good morning, who says there is indeed a witch hunt for Suella Braverman. And Catherine says, I live in Kent. The immigration problems are not new to people who live in this country. This goes back to the illegal immigrants in the back of lorries, jumping free and escaping into the countryside. Where are they now? Nobody knows. Well, let us know your perspective on Suella Braverman, what she had to say in the House of Commons yesterday. Is this a witch hunt? And was she right to say that the migrants arriving in the UK was an invasion? GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Well, let's start with our top story then. Suella Braverman saying she is the victim of a political witch hunt as she defends her record as Home Secretary.
Well, speaking in the Commons last night to address, both the migrant crisis and also her own handling of sensitive Home Office documents, she said mistakes had been made, but she wouldn't apologise for things that she hadn't done.
And addressing the Manston crisis, the Home Secretary said she wasn't to blame, claiming she had never blocked the use of hotels to ease pressure on the processing centre there.
Well, she also described the influx of migrants as an invasion.
The British people deserve to know which party is serious about stopping the invasion on our southern coast and which party is not.
Well, let's go live to Downing Street to speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, a very good morning to you. We're really battling, well, the Home Secretary's battling two fronts there. How did she handle it yesterday?
Yeah, two fronts indeed. I think for many of her supporters, she handled it pretty well, given
the tough line of questioning, not just from the opposition, but indeed some of the Conservative MPs on the back benches. Let's look at these two issues. First of all, clearly there are the problems with those processing centres in Kent. One was attacked on Sunday, the other one in Maidstone, and Kent has had to deal with a hell of a lot of numbers in recent days. It is meant to process no more than 1,500 people for a period between 24 to 48 hours, yet it's been dealing with over 4,000, some of whom have been there not just for days, but indeed for weeks. I think in certain circumstances up to 5 weeks. It is not a facility that is built to cope for people for that period of time, or indeed the sheer numbers. And so that's why there's been criticism of the Home Secretary, because repeatedly and reportedly officials in the Home Office have suggested that she has failed to book hotel space for many of these migrants, asylum seekers who've arrived on the southern coast of England. Now, why is that important? Well, first of all, it could have helped contribute to that backlog and to the conditions that have been described by inspectorates as wretched. And at the same time, it clearly means that some would argue she's been failing in her ministerial duty by defying those orders from inside the Home Office. But, and it is a massive but, the Home Secretary insists those reports are wrong, that she has not prevented the booking of hotel space, in fact that she has authorised it, and that she is not part of the problem. So it'll be interesting to see where that leads to, given the fact, as I say, that officials are continuing to brief the media that the Home Secretary is not right in this, but there is no smoking gun if we are frank about it. And second of all, it's around the use of this language invasion, this wartime language. Now, many people feel that it is an appropriate term. People like Nigel Farage on our channel last night were saying precisely just that. You listen to people like David Frost, who says that this is all part of a political witch hunt, or John Redwood, another backer of Suella Braverman, who says that the continued pursuit of the Home Secretary over micro details by Labour and some of the media looks unreasonable, even obsessional. Though for others, including the Labour opposition and indeed some Conservative MPs, they feel that the use of the word invasion is entirely inappropriate. Roger Gale, who is the MP for the constituent which Maidstone is based, the refugee centre, he says that it is a very great danger to use this language, inflammatory language, that people need to use their language carefully because extremists latch on to these very words. And this is all aside, as you say, for the continuing row about the use of her emails, questions again about the timeline of events that she says that she came forward as soon as she'd realised she'd made that mistake. Lots of suggestions that's not entirely the case, along with the fact that many people still would challenge the idea that she's an appropriate Home Secretary given the security breaches and the breach of the ministerial code. But it's clear that she is defiant, very defiant indeed, that she's almost challenging her critics to come and get her. She essentially says that lots of people want her out of a job because they don't agree with her politically. And at the moment, crucially, of course, she has got the backing of the man behind me, the new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak.
All right, thank you for that analysis, Darren. That's our political editor at Downing Street, Darren McCaffrey. Let's speak to the diary editor of The Spectator and co-author of Out of the Blue, the inside story of the unexpected rise and rapid fall of Liz Truss. James Hill, morning to you, James. Suella Braverman, is she still going to be in office in a couple of weeks' time?
That's a great question. Lots of Westminster is asking this morning. I think that she has a lot of support among a certain section of the Conservative Party. I think people feel that supporters of the Tory Party think, well, she might have got a few things wrong in the sort of minor details, but she gets the big question right, which is the need to tackle this. But obviously, given the way in which all these sort of accusations are being levied at her, some fairly, some unfairly, it is a question about whether she'll be able to command the confidence of the Prime Minister in a few weeks' time.
OK, which do you think are the unfair accusations being levelled?
I think that in terms of the way in which the Labour Party are approaching this issue, I think there's certainly a great deal of political opportunism in that you've clearly got a system where it's been put under enormous stress, and I think also you've got a Home Office culture where it's very difficult for them to cooperate because partly the goodwill on both sides has sort of broken down over the years. So I do feel some sort of sympathy for her. What I do think is that there are still questions hanging over her from her first resignation only 2 weeks ago, which is still yet to be answered. I think that's the problem, is that she can't kind of move this issue forward because those things are still overhanging her. and actually coming up with a proper policy solution to this crisis.
Yeah, so really what she needs to do is have no more breaches of the ministerial code.
That would be a start.
That would be a start, and then start to actually act and work out how she's going to... She claims she's going to fix the problem.
Yeah.
She hasn't actually said how she's going to do it.
Yes, and I think what's interesting, you've seen Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister, doing the morning round today. Now, he's a very close ally of Rishi Sunak from a different probably part of the party than Suella Braverman. So it'll be interesting to see, is this a sign that Rishi Sunak is going to put significant kind of political capital and resources into backing this, or is this a sense of just letting Suella Braverman and the ERG do their thing, and will they get actually proper support from the centre in dealing with all the stuff that's coming at them?
Well, we'll be hearing from Robert Jenrick on this programme in about an hour's time, so don't miss that. But look, front page of many of the papers today, we're talking about senior Tories condemning the actions of the Home Secretary. This is already a fractured party because of the leadership contest, the support for Liz Truss, as we'll go on to talk to you about in a second. If she can't foster support, and even the local MP is saying, no, what she did was not appropriate and has caused this massive problem, how is her position going to be tenable?
Well, this is the question, which is, it comes down to the legal framework in which we're involved here. It's partly to do with the ECHR, it's partly to do with existing UK law. So if you can only do so much in terms of sort of resources and rhetoric, etc., putting more people on the ground, it comes down to how does the system itself work. And as you say, given the way in which we saw with Liz Truss, where she designed a mini budget and went too fast and it all imploded, I think the danger is if Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak kind of try and push it forward in the Commons, you're going to see some of those scenes that we saw with Roger Gale standing there and saying this is, what's gone wrong is appalling and reducing the UK's reputation. So, I mean, I'm struggling. I was struck listening to that interview with Lucy Powell. I thought, Labour didn't have much to say on this. And the problem is that this is an issue that a part of the public really feel passionately about. And yet there is nothing filling it other than words. And, Lucy Powell's response was, we wouldn't be in the situation we are. Well, we are in the situation. It's partly because we've got an unchanged system from when the Labour were replaced by the Tories. What's going to change that? And I can't see anything happening anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yeah, and she wouldn't commit either to whether Labour would book more hotels in the short term to deal with the problem, because there's
backlog.
Yeah, there's a backlog, isn't there? There's the long-term structural problem of the whole immigration system, how you claim asylum, etc., and how long it takes to process those claims. And then there's a short-term problem.
Exactly, and there's how much of it is the short, medium term, and actually thinking long-term, because at the moment there's been so much can-kicking from the last couple of years. Lots of promises, Priti Patel, all that kind of stuff. The Rwanda solution was going to be this great silver bullet, and actually I think people are getting a bit tired of it right now.
Yeah, difficult for the government to distance itself from the Conservative Party, to distance themselves from it, and that creates an open goal for Labour, doesn't it?
Well, quite. And after 12 years in office, people will turn around and say, well, hang on, you haven't fixed this. Now, in fairness, this has been a thing that's been developing over the last 3-4 years or so, but equally, there's only so many times you can stand up and say we're going to deal with it, or people think we're going to try a punt on the alternative.
12 years in office, several prime ministers.
Yes.
You've just written a book about the rise of Liz Truss, and then had to document the very sharp decline. How much is Liz Truss, in part, to blame with the situation we inherit ourselves now?
Well, I think in the economy, she tried to do something very different, very radical. And I think that clearly that did not go as well as planned. She lost, I think, the sight of what the markets were thinking, and therefore that backfired. And, Rishi Sunak, when he came, was reported to have said, when I left, there was a 30 billion surplus. What's happened to it? Well, it's all gone Prime Minister. Now, I think that's a little bit unfair on her, but what is certainly clear is that she tried to do a radical change mid-term government, and it clearly didn't have enough support within the party for that, and it's now backfired. So I think Rishi Sunak's come in, ironically, being the beneficiary of what went on in the summer and saying, look, I said all this was happen, and I'm going to feel vindicated as a result of it. So although she may be gone for now in political history, I think that people will be hopefully interesting in this book about the forces that made Liz Truss, and the kind of people who put her into office are still there on the back benches,
Yeah, and any other books in the pipeline as well? One on Rishi Sunak?
I did. I ran into a senior Labour politician the other day, and I said, we're going to do you next. And he sort of shrank at that and said, everyone you write about, James, their career dies, so please don't do that. And I think after this experience, we're going to write about someone who's very long dead in the literal sense, because we can't do any more
the corridors of the Commons, James Heal's coming, quick.
The reverse Midas touch.
Yeah, exactly,
You've uncovered Liz Truss's espresso drinking habit, which might put her sort of arteries at risk. It sounds extreme.
I mean, it was one of her advisors just said that she was just someone who sort of operated on 42,000 espressos a day. Her metabolism was crazy because she would just eat all the stuff and be burn it off. And she obviously, she was just someone who operated 110 miles per hour. And there are lots of merits of that in getting that departmental, Minister, but as Prime Minister, the danger is obviously you go too fast and you end up with sort of the mini-budget where you're sort of urging each other on and there's not enough checks and balances.
So is that the explanation for rushing out the mini-budget so quick? Just too much caffeine? We've got to get this out quick. We've got to get this out quick.
I think maybe, I wouldn't attribute it all to caffeine. I think the intoxication of power is perhaps more accurate, perhaps.
James, good to see you this morning.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah. At front page of the Telegraph this morning, by the way, sweeping tax rises on rough road ahead. This is only in the Telegraph this morning. The PM and the Chancellor agreed burden must be shared to fill £50 billion hole in public finances.
Yeah, so as the Home Secretary is dealing with those current controversies laid out, many people, and you may be doing this too, focusing on the looming budget. We're expecting that to be on the 17th of November.
Yeah, so as we said, the Telegraph reporting that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister are looking at a combination of tax cuts, of tax rises, I should say, and spending cuts to try and plug that hole in the public finances. We can speak to our political reporter, Olivia Utley, who joins us now for the latest. Olivia, just tell us a little bit more about these plans to plug this hole.
Yes, so it does sound like we're in for a very rough ride ahead. The Telegraph report suggests that Jeremy Hunt is looking at 50% tax rises and 50% public spending cuts to make up that £50 billion shortfall we keep hearing in public funds. What the spokesperson for the Prime Minister says is that those with the broadest shoulders should bear the biggest burden. So I think we can expect to see a big extension of the windfall tax, for example, to put a lot of that burden onto oil and gas companies who, as we've heard this morning, are profiting quite a lot at the moment. But he says also that everyone should expect to see, pretty much everyone should expect to see tax rises or public spending cuts. There's a suggestion that public sector workers could be targeted, so we could see some sort of stealth tax, some sort of freeze in public sector pay. We know how politically unpalatable that's going to be, but it feels as though the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have sort of got to the end of the road here. They've picked all the low-hanging fruit, and so they're going to be imposing some sort of austerity budget, possibly on a greater scale than George Osborne's austerity budget, because, of course, there was low-hanging fruit to be picked 20 years ago, which there isn't anymore. So, yeah, it's going to be a very challenging budget for the Prime Minister and the Chancellor.
And we're getting just those hints of what it's going to look like. Olivia, thank you very much for bringing us the details.
It is 8:16. Some other top stories doing the rounds this morning. The oil giant BP revealing their profits more than doubled over the past quarter. The company says their replacement cost profits increased by £4.2 billion compared to last year.
The Northern Ireland Secretary is going to hold talks with Stormont leaders later today. There is uncertainty over whether he'll call an election. Chris Eaton-Harris didn't set a date for a new poll last Friday, despite previously indicating that he would.
And the Collins Dictionary has announced that perma-crisis is the word of the year. The word describes an extended period of instability and insecurity, and a lot more people are using it because of the ongoing crises in the UK and the world.
Now, a new trailer's been released for The Crown, Series 5 now. According to cast members, the latest offering will bring drama with a capital D.
The show will depict the royal family in the 1990s, including the famous 1992 fire at Windsor Castle and the divorce of Charles and Diana, which led to the Queen dubbing that year an annus horribilis. In a moment, we'll speak to Vanity Fair royal editor and author Katie Nicholl. First of all, let's have a look at a trailer for the new series of The Crown.
Constancy, stability, duty.
Well, duty or drama? Let's find out. Katie, thank you for joining us. What do you think Season 5 is going to have in store?
Do you know what? I think the producers and Peter Morgan must be absolutely clapping their hands with joy, because look how much coverage this series has had before we've even seen the first episode of Series 5. It has just had so much press. You know, and these trailers are sort of very cleverly being drip-fed to us. And, you know, I think it's interesting. When you're on social media, and I sort of regularly see what my followers are saying, you know, very few are saying we're actually going to boycott this series. There's such an interest in wanting to see it. So it's absolutely going to be drama with a capital D. I think you're going to see duty reflected in it because, of course, let's not forget that this is a fictional series based on real events. And of course, you know, you will see that theme of duty running through it. But I think far more than duty, you're going to see drama. You're going to see the big episodes of the 90s. I mean, 92, the Annus Horribilis, you know, famously those words immortalised now by the Queen, the late Queen. And probably, I think for most people, the most critical time of recent royal history. We're all very familiar with those events. And of course, they were going to be reenacted and replayed by the members of the cast.
Yeah. Norman Baker, former politician, royal author, has said he's not comfortable with The Crown because it merges fact and fiction too much and it's difficult for people to discern which is which. How do you feel about that?
Well, listen, I've done covering the royals now for the best part of 2 decades, and I'll be honest with you, there are moments when I sort of watch it and I'm not watching it to review it, I'm watching it just to enjoy it. And you do have a pinch me moment because the casting is so brilliant, the cinematography is so beautifully done. You do forget that you're actually watching something that is fictitious. So I take his point. I do think that Netflix have done the right thing by adding a disclaimer to the trailer. I think people must remember it is drama. And we've got the lead star, Elizabeth Debicki, who plays Diana, saying, come on, let's stop sniping about this. Let's take it in the spirit that it is intended, which is, it's a drama. Well, yes, it is, but it is so accurate in so many ways that in terms of casting and the events it's covering, that sometimes people do forget that.
And the timeline is getting closer, which makes it more awkward because we're talking about people who are alive now.
And who have recently passed away. And for the Queen, the memory of the Queen, I think some people do feel that it is a little too close to the bone. And of course, for King Charles III, this is a period of his past and of the royal family's past that he would much rather move on from. I think the last thing he and his courtiers would want is for the start of his reign to be overshadowed by probably the most critical and difficult period in recent royal history. It's an area that they'd rather move on from, but not able to.
Yeah, are you picking up that more people are generally interested in the royal family since the death of the Queen, and so by logic, extension, more people will be watching this?
Do you know what? I think since this series started, even people who weren't interested in the royal family, because it is so well done, have gone to The Crown wanting to learn more. Post the Queen's death, there has been such an interest. We've seen so many books, and we've got Prince Harry's book coming out. There are books galore. I think this will probably be the most watched, most popular series. I could be proved wrong, but we'll wait and see.
Talking about Prince Harry's book, we've talked about it quite extensively this week already, but it does play into question, and with the next series of I'm a Celebrity coming up, that role that the royal...
Prince Harry's obviously taken a lot of criticism over the autobiography. Again, we haven't even read a page of it yet, and he's been slammed for writing an autobiography because many feel that it's him cashing in on his royal connections. But we've got Mike Tindall going into I'm a Celebrity, and we've seen him advertising for Amazon Prime. I think this is where Charles's vision for a slimmed-down, scaled-back monarchy has its real importance, because actually Mike Tindall, Zara Phillips, they're not working royals. They need to make a living. You might question whether I'm a Celebrity is the way to do that. That's your personal opinion. But actually, you are seeing more a commercialisation of the minor royals, and I think that distance that King Charles has now put between those that work for the royal family, the senior top tier of royals, and those who are royal by name but don't have a public role, I think most people would say actually it's the right thing to do, and let the minor royals go and make money however they deem necessary or fit. I think the problem for Prince Harry is he isn't just a minor royal, he is Prince Harry. He was for so many years the spare, and of course he's going to open up an explosive chapter of history, just as the Crown have done.
Yeah. Katie, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. That is Katie Nichols, royal author. After the break, we'll go to Lincolnshire, where their poppy appeal is taking off with the help of one of the last surviving Lancaster bombers.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to the programme. It is coming up to 8:30, 8:27. Still to come here on the programme. It's 15 years since the death of Meredith Kercher. Now, at 8:45, we're going to speak to a man who was falsely convicted of her murder, the former boyfriend of Amanda Knox.
And just after 9, we'll speak to the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, about the crisis at the Migrant Detention Centre at Manston. We'll also ask if he thinks the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is up to the job.
You can join in any of our discussions. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet @gbnews.
Actually, lots of you getting in touch with us this morning about the word of the year, which was perma-crisis, apparently, because we've come after... Well, basically, there's a lot of bad things going on in the world with inflation and war in the UK and in the world, and so this word permacrisis, according to the Collins Dictionary, is the word of the year. But we also quite liked another word that was highlighted by the dictionary, Splooting.
No, you liked that word, which is when
you not like
an
splooting?
Animal stretches. Well, I didn't like the idea that it seemed like it was a really word we were all using all the time in our vocabulary, but it turns out it's just a word that's increasing in its usage. But we asked you for any words you'd like to pitch for Word of the Year, and Paul said, we call our remote control for the TV a doofer. Pass the doofer.
I'm down with that one. Karen says, feeling tired one day. She said, I'm feeling pan-paused. It's a great word that's stuck with us ever since. And Rich says, how about snurching? It means looking for or at sneakily.
When are you sneakily looking at things? I don't know.
Snurching.
Maybe you sneakily be looking at someone else's notes. I don't know.
Yeah, so look, gbviews at gbnews.uk for your own personal words you use in your house, a bit like splooting. It is 8:29. Poppy appeals are being launched across the country. In Lincolnshire, thousands of poppy petals have been launched from the back of a Lancaster bomber in honour of British Armed Forces.
Now, it's one of only a handful left in Britain, now serves as a symbol of remembrance. Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis went to find out more.
Once bombs fell from the Lancaster, now here in Lincolnshire, poppies. Quite a sight, even for 97-year-old Navy veteran Alfred, who watched the war end from his ship in Tokyo.
The Admiral of the British fleet went on board the Missouri to sign the declaration, and we could see in the distance them actually signing it, which was a great honour.
Ahead of Remembrance, the Royal British Legion sells poppies to raise funds for veterans while honouring the sacrifice made by so many in the armed forces. Hundreds of servicemen and women come to the old East Kirkby RAF base for the appeal's launch, including Clive.
I lost a few friends in Aden during my time in 64, 65 with the Coasting Guards, and it was just something that sticks with you.
John is county chairman at the Legion.
We believe that everybody wearing a poppy is remembering. It doesn't matter about necessarily how much money they've put into the pot to raise funds, but it's the wearing of the poppy that counts.
The old base is now a museum and home to Just Jane, one of only 4 Lancaster bombers left in the UK. During the war, more than 7,000 were built and are credited with taking the fight to Germany when Britain was facing defeat.
Despite the sheer scale of the bomber from the outside, inside it's actually quite tight. You can only imagine how difficult it was to walk around in here during a bombing raid above Berlin when you were being shot at. From this airfield alone at East Kirkby, 3 planes were lost on average a week.
Now Just Jane is used for remembrance events and heritage. She can't fly, but drives visitors along the runway. For Ivan, riding the Lancaster today is special.
The photograph you can see is my dad, and he was a frame mechanic, and behind him is a Lancaster which has been crashed. And he was an airframe mechanic, and this was his job, what they call the smash and grab crew. And I'm very proud of it.
Volunteers like Mark spend their time keeping this history alive.
The young ground crews would have charged the brake presses in exactly the same way, because they'd have moved the aircraft around on the ground to the dispersals.
It's hoped that Jane can be restored completely and fly in future memorials. Andrew is manager at the museum.
To come and see a Lancaster running, it's kind of the ultimate way to remember Bomber Command and those that gave their lives. It kind of takes on a whole different atmosphere and different feeling when it starts up and runs rather than just being held in a hangar static.
Beyond the planes and poppies, Remembrance is about the people who gave their lives and still serve for Britain. Will Hollis for GB News in East Kirkby.
Well, elsewhere in Leeds now, Poppy Day is bringing together uniformed personnel from the Royal Navy, the Army, the Royal Air Force, as well as veterans and supporters for a whole range of different activities taking place across the city centre.
And now Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley joins us from Leeds now. Anna, morning to you. What's happening where you are?
Good morning. Yes, we are in the headquarters that the Royal British Legion have set up today ahead of Poppy Day, where thousands of people will be coming out buying poppies, and I'm here with Jo Ticehurst. She's organising today Leeds Poppy Day. Tell us about it today, Jo.
OK, so it's really exciting. We've got 2 groups of military personnel coming from Leconfield and Leeming, and they're going to storm the city, and they're going to be in uniform. They're going to raise as much money as they possibly can. There's also the Army Band from Catterick. They're going to be playing 2 sets in the train station, one about 11 and one about 1, and please come down and support the day.
And what is it all about, you know, buying that poppy? Where does that money go? How does it help people?
OK, so we raise money to help military people, ex-serving people and their families in any way that they need help. So that could be from simple things like buying them a fridge or helping them out with some finance or some debt, to our major centres like the Battleback Centre, where our military people go to recover, or if they've got PTSD or serious injuries.
So what does wearing that poppy mean then for people?
To a lot of people, it's about remembering. People wear it with pride. They want to show they remember. People gave their lives for us so that we could live today. And it's also about showing that they care. You know, this year, get a poppy, show you care.
Definitely, and there's other events across the UK, isn't there, like poppy days for people to come out and buy those poppies, and then Remembrance is coming up as well.
Definitely, so poppies will be on the sale in the street from now for the next 2 weeks until the 11th of November. And there's also, we've got some more city poppy days coming up. So we've got Bristol, Birmingham, Manchester and London. If you're around the days, they're all this week. I would just have a look online to see what dates they are and support them. It will be just fantastic. And we just thank everybody, especially our volunteers, and for the FDM group for letting us have such fabulous headquarters here today.
Thank you so much, Jo. So yes, people here in Leeds today out selling poppies, out buying poppies. It's going to be an interesting day, and we'll be reporting throughout the day on that. People buying those poppies and what it means for the Royal British Legion and the people that they support.
Yeah, absolutely. Anna, thank you so much for that. That's our Yorkshire and Humber reporter in Leeds, Anna Riley.
Now, after the break, we're going to be going through the papers once more with Norman Baker and Cindy Yu. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan Tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
It is 20 to 9, time to go through the papers. Joining us in the studio is the former Liberal Democrat Minister, Norman Baker, and broadcaster and editor of the broadcast editor of the Speaker, Cindy Ewan. Nearly gave you a promotion there, Cindy. And let's start with the front page of the Metro if we can. And we've been talking about migration, illegal immigration at some length on the programme today. But the Metro says, welcome to the UK, and it's got these pictures of children looking through the fence at that facility in Manston, and lots of questions for the Home Secretary to answer as to why it was that when this centre's already at capacity, she sent hundreds more people there.
Yeah, I mean, look, you might think that illegal immigration is completely immoral and that these people shouldn't be here at all. But the fact that they've made it here, the fact that we can't give them somewhere clean and safe just for the processing period, which is not meant to be 18 months as it is at the moment, something's broken in the system, and Suella Braverman was absolutely right to point that out. We should be processing these people, and if they're not genuine asylum seekers, they then should be sent back. But because the processing is taking so long, you've got 4,000 people at Manston, and that's a facility for 1,600 people. So part of the problem is this attack on Dover over the weekend where some people had to be moved out. But I guess it just goes to show the febrile nature of the conversation in this country, certain people feeling, Suella Braverman used the word invasion, feeling invaded. But I think regardless of what you think about these asylum seekers or refugees or migrants coming over, once they are over, we should be giving them somewhere safe and clean to be for the processing period. And then we should be deciding, do we want to let them come in or do we want to deport them back to where they came from?
Norman, why is it taking so long to do that processing?
That's a very good question. It's been taking longer and longer as years have gone by, and it's a failure of the Home Office, which is a dysfunctional department. It was actually in my day, as far as the immigration side was concerned, dysfunctional. It's even worse now. But that's a very powerful front page in the Metro. I don't know if your viewers can see it or not. No beds, thank you. No beds, no fresh air, no toilet doors, no compassion. But diphtheria and scabies and other conditions there, which are just appalling. And we should be ashamed of that situation over there.
Yeah, and we're going to be speaking to Robert Jenrick, the Immigration Minister, shortly. Cindy, page 14 of the Times, schools urged to teach less British history. What do they mean by that?
Yeah, so this is the historian Simon Sebag Montefiore, who's the author of A World History. And he's basically saying, obviously with recent years of Black Lives Matter and Rose Must Fall and all these discussions, people have been focusing more on how little we teach about empire in this country, in our history lessons. I don't know about anyone here, but when I was growing up, it was a lot about the Tudors, a lot about the Nazis, year after year after year. And I personally think that we should be teaching more of different aspects of British history. But Simon Sebag Montefiore is saying that we should be teaching more world history as well. And I think I do agree with that. Obviously, there's only so much time to be teaching history at all. But instead of repeating the same kind of modules that are very navel-gazing, we should be learning more about India, for example. We should be learning about Russia and Ukraine, what's happening there, why have we come to the situation. We should be learning more about China, how did the Communist Party come about? All of these things which children in this country, growing up to be adults, are not equipped to understand. Add to that our lack of language abilities. It does become very inward-looking very, very quickly. And that's not to say that British history shouldn't be taught at all. Yeah. We absolutely should be proud of British history and teach the Tudors and Empire and everything else.
Just out of interest, what languages would you teach?
Oh,
Or
well, at the
should-
moment
should
we
they?
do. Well, at the moment we do French and German and Spanish.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's more of a space for Mandarin to understand China more. I mean, I would say that, being a Mandarin speaker myself. But I think children should basically be encouraged more. And I've looked into this when it comes to Chinese degrees, for example. The amount of people graduating with Chinese language degrees in this country is 300 a year,
Wow.
which has not increased since the 1990s.
Okay.
And this is a time when China has become much stronger. So it's just about being much more outward-looking in order to, if you think they're enemies, to know our enemies, or if they think they're potential allies, then we need to understand their context, we need to understand their history. Very, very important stuff.
Yeah.
Should we look at a bit more English and dictionary names? Norman, in the paper, in the Eye.
Yes.
Permacrisis, we've been talking about on the programme, is the word of the year.
We have, as well as Partygate, which is also mentioned. Whether Partygate will last or not, I don't know. And Warm Bank, rather sadly, describing a heated building where people go when they've got nowhere else to go and they want to keep warm. I've got a post-war dictionary I found at home, and it's got an appendix at the back with new words from 1953 in the back of the dictionary. Wizard prang is in there, which of course was related to the RAF and the Second World War. But you look at these new words in 53 and you realise most of them have gone. So I just wonder how many of these new words will actually survive and be with us in even 5 or 6 years' time, because they do go. The English language is terribly creative. It's an organic language.
Oh, yeah.
It's a fantastic language, and I speak as a former English teacher, that it just evolves in a way that no other language does, and I just love it. You know, you got a phrase like cheese-eating surrender monkeys, which Americans used about the French, or I think George Bush used about the French, which is a fantastic phrase. I don't agree with it, but fantastic phrase. But my favourite Bushism, by the way, is when he said of the French, the trouble with the French is there's no word for entrepreneur.
Yeah, I thought you might say that. By the way, earlier we were contacted by Rich. You were talking about how creative the English language is.
Yes.
So we were asking people to get in touch with us about words that they use at home. Rich says, how about snurching? Looking for or at sneakily.
Yeah, I've never heard of that word before. It's an interesting word. I don't know where that's come from.
Is that often
But I've never heard.
I don't think it just might be Rich's own.
As a Mandarin speaker, is there that kind of flexibility in Mandarin with words
actually.
to combine?
There's a lot of transliteration of English words. So, for example, the word for sofa is shafa, because it's come from the UK. So there's a lot of stuff like that, where salad is sela. You know, there's a lot of stuff like that where you can almost trace the etymology and the origins of something like that. Because, you know, if we just talk about sofas, Chinese people didn't sit on sofas until they came from the West. So, you know, it is also very, very flexible. And actually, increasingly, Chinese people use English words in their everyday speech.
They just throw it in every other word.
Exactly, like common phrases that everyone would know, and it becomes increasingly common.
Interesting.
Let's look at the FT and China, particularly their electric cars.
Yes, so I picked this story because we've all heard of Tesla. We all know that electric cars are coming in, petrol cars are being phased out, which is why I'm particularly keen to look at China's influence on this. I think when it comes to China, there's a reputation that it has for being, this coal-burning, polluting power in the world. And of course, that is true. Paradoxically, though, China's also very, very good at renewable energy and renewable tech. And I think if we don't basically keep an eye on that, it'll be like the next Huawei, where it'll be like, well, when did they come about, being so good at this particular area of tech? So what we're talking about here is Chinese EV manufacturers who are coming into Europe, and they're going to be giving European car manufacturers a proper run for their money. And I think it'll be a very interesting story to be following.
Yeah.
Should we end on a very different note? If we go to Norman and to the Star, talking about camel milk.
Well, Daily Star's had a good run recently, hasn't it, with lettuce and Liz Truss?
Yes.
And this is a story about camel milk, which, as you say, is going to be stocked by Aldi, because apparently it's called a superfood.
Is it expensive?
Well, they don't say it's expensive or not, but I mean, I'm a bit dubious about it, to be honest with you, as to whether or not you can put it in your tea. 1 hump or 2, perhaps, on your...
You've scratched that itch. I was sitting here itching about to say it. You scratched that itch, Norman.
Sorry about that.
Would you trade in your cow's milk for camel milk?
No, I think I like my normal milk, or oat milk's all right, actually.
Oat milk, OK, right, there we go.
Yeah.
Norman, thank you. Cindy, it's been a pleasure having you both for the programme this morning. For you at home, don't go anywhere. 8:48. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories making the headlines.
The International Trade Secretary says the UK must future-proof its economy by investing in green tech. In a speech in Newcastle later today, Kemi Badenoch is expected to highlight new technologies to combat climate change and how they could create high-paying skills, jobs and energy security.
The Northern Ireland Secretary will hold talks with Stormont leaders later today. There's uncertainty over whether he'll call an election. Chris Heaton-Harris didn't set a date for a new poll last Friday, even though he indicated he would.
And Collins Dictionary, as we've just been discussing, has announced that permacrisis is the word of the year. It describes an extended period of instability and insecurity. It's been used a lot in the UK and around the world.
Now, today is 15 years since the death of Meredith Kercher, the British student whose murder in Italy led to the infamous false convictions of Amanda Knox and her then-boyfriend, Raphael Sollecito.
The pair recently reunited in Gubbio, the same place they had planned to visit on the day that Meredith's body was tragically discovered.
Well, we're joined by Raphael now. Thank you very much for your time. How are you reflecting today, 15 years on?
Well, I have a lot of, my life is full with job. I'm a cloud solution architect. So I love working in IT and I live in Milan. My daily life is work and study for my certifications and sometimes go out with friends and when I was with Amanda was in June, actually, not very recently. But we, because she was in Italy, we decided to spend the weekend in Gubbio with our family as well. It was nice actually to go around and visit Gubbio because we didn't have the chance to visit that city. We planned on when we were dating back then. It was quite controversial. I had quite controversial feelings back then because, of course, it's quite different now because all the tragedy we passed through and all the suffering we had during the trial and recapping with our lives afterwards. So it was nice to take your mind off sometimes and think about something lighter, actually. But it was back in June, of course.
Yeah. The effect on your life, undoubtedly, that has not been good for you, but would you agree that it has been dwarfed by the effect on Meredith Kercher's family, the effect on their life, the family of Meredith Kercher? What would you say to her family if you could talk to them today?
Her family, they actually stick on the persecution theory, and Meredith didn't deserve anything. I didn't deserve that fate, and her parents as well. I'm sad for what happened to her family and her, but I don't have anything to do with this. And of course, I didn't even know her actually. This tragedy affected all of us: me, Amanda, Meredith, Patrick Lumumba, and it has been a storm inside of our lives. I had also a lot of issues recapping with my life and make it in order. I wish the Meredith's brother and sister could even dig deeper into the investigation on her murder, because the prosecution did fail totally in this situation, and the only murder, Rudy Guede, is still having attention and writing books and blaming others for the murder. So it's quite, it's quite bad. It's really bad. And I mean, I don't know what I will do in that situation, actually.
You've described it as being a storm. What's it been like for you?
Well, there are different periods because at first I had a lot of issues because of many people look at me in a very bad way. There was a lot of prejudice in a negative way. And I had to work as a freelance, and it was hard to finish my studies and do some job. And along the time, it was quite difficult because sometimes there was prejudice in companies, and sometimes there was prejudice on the other side, like being very positive in my looking at my story. But it was always something that I couldn't imagine or I couldn't control, and it was really hard to get the opportunity to go inside the company and make them feel comfortable that they will not have any media attention on them, because most of the times where I was rejected at first was about the reason was that the companies were afraid that their brand would match my my media exposure in some way.
Raphael, appreciate your thoughts this morning. Thank you very much. Raphael Sollecito there. And on the 15th anniversary of the death of Meredith Kercher, our thoughts very much with her family.
After the break here on Breakfast, we're going to be joined by our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, to be breaking down the rumours that we're hearing about the reports of tax rises in the autumn statement. That's after the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A windy start to the day, especially in the south where there are English Channel gales for a time. Showers for many, though, replacing the main area of rain that went through during the night, and that rain is now clearing the east of England, northeast Scotland, pushing into the Northern Isles. Now, there are further weather fronts coming through during the rest of the day. They'll contain showery rain, and so really it's rain on and off for many, carried through by this gusty wind. Although the Channel's gales will moderate through the day, I think it's going to stay very blustery in the south, particularly around coasts, and these showers will come through at pace. Where they occur, they're going to be heavy with the threat of thunder, but they'll be interspersed by some brighter spells. 15 or 16 Celsius in the south, 12 or 13 further north. I think northern England, southern Scotland, eastern Scotland seeing some drier and brighter spells for a time, but showers will continue for western Scotland and Northern Ireland, eventually pushing through the rest of Scotland, much of England and Wales as well during the evening. Eventually, during the early hours of tomorrow, we're going to see some clearer interludes, some lighter winds, and as a result, it's going to be a colder night compared with recent nights, certainly a fresher start to Wednesday compared with recent mornings. But some brightness around first thing for much of central and eastern Scotland, England and Wales. Quite quickly, however, through the morning, further wet and windy weather reaches Northern Ireland into Scotland and then much of northern and western England as well as Wales. The wind's really picking up through the day. Gale force across Irish Sea coast with the risk of 65-mile-per-hour wind gusts. That could cause disruption, yellow warning in force for that. But the rain doesn't quite reach eastern England until the end of the day. Bright and breezy here, whilst it persists in the southeast on Thursday with bright spells and showers following to the rest of the UK. Either way, it stays blustery, but temperatures fall.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank and, of course, fun every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Suella Braverman insists she's the victim of a political witch hunt as she defends her record as Home Secretary.
Very good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Tuesday, the 1st of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Rosie Wright and Paul Hawkins. Your top stories this morning.
The Home Secretary has claimed she's not to blame for the crisis at the Manston Refugee Centre as she fights to remain in her job. Speaking in the Commons last night, she also addressed her handling of classified Home Office documents, accusing her critics of launching a witch hunt.
Elsewhere this morning, the PM and the Chancellor are reportedly drawing up plans for major tax hikes in an effort to fill a £50 billion fiscal hole left by Liz Truss. The rises are expected to be announced in the autumn statement on the 17th of November.
And the star of The Crown, Elizabeth Debicki, has urged critics of the controversial show to move on. The actress who portrays Princess Diana said she hoped people would stop attacking the series now that a disclaimer's been added to the trailer.
Lots of you getting in touch with us this morning about on a range of different things, especially about Suella Braverman. Do keep them coming in. GBviews at gbnews.uk or at GB News.
To our top story then, and Suella Braverman said she's the victim of a political witch hunt. She's defending her record as Home Secretary.
Speaking in the Commons last night to address both the migrant crisis and her own handling of sensitive Home Office documents. She said mistakes had been made, but she wouldn't apologise for things she hadn't done.
And addressing the Manston crisis, the Home Secretary said she was not to blame, claiming she'd never blocked the use of hotels to ease pressure on the processing centre that's there.
She also described the influx of migrants as an invasion.
The British people deserve to know which party is serious about stopping the invasion on our southern coast and which party is not.
Let's find out more and head to Downing Street to speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, a very good morning to you. So, the Home Secretary there answering questions on two quite serious fronts yesterday.
Yeah, indeed, Rosie. Let's first of all look at the one that involves the essential crisis that we're seeing in those processing centres in Kent. One was attacked in Dover, the other one in Manston is frankly struggling with the numbers of people who have turned up there. We're looking at around 4,000, even though the facility itself is only really equipped to deal with 1,500 at most, and only for a 24 to 48 hour period, though there have been some refugees and migrants who've been there for up to 5 weeks thus far, and that is why the Home Secretary is under pressure, not least of all because of that crisis, but maybe because she may well have made it worse with suggestions from some inside the Home Office and others that she deliberately decided not to book hotels so that these people could move on elsewhere. Now, that is a claim she very strenuously denied repeatedly in the Commons yesterday, saying that it is simply not true. That we'll have to see where the truth lies, but fundamentally she has told the Commons that it's not true, and at this point we do have to believe the Home Secretary on that point. But also there's been criticism over this use of the word invasion, some feeling that it goes too far, others feel that it's an accurate representation of what's been happening. Nigel Farage, for example, on GB News last night was making that very point. But for others, including Sir Roger Gale, he is the MP for Thanet, he says that he was unimpressed with the language, saying that it was a very great danger with her inflammatory language, that people need to use their language carefully because extremists latch on to those words. People will disagree about this. It is certainly divisive. It is certainly provocative. I think it was very deliberately chosen by the Home Secretary as a statement that she is here not to kind of pussyfoot around the issues, if you like, that she wants to take and tackle this head on. The big problem, though, I would suggest for Suella Braverman, is that we've heard much of this before from her successive Conservative Home Secretaries. Theresa May used quite similar arguments back in 2014 and 2015. Amber Rudd did the same. Priti Patel has done the same, and yet very little has changed. If anything, things have got significantly worse, and there is little sign, I think, frankly, that this Home Secretary is going to make any significant difference beyond her predecessors, but we shall wait and see. And this all aside, as you say, from the fact there are continued questions about her use of private emails and her timeline of events that initially led to her resignation, 2 weeks ago, though her statement as Home Secretary happened, a week today. And this morning, Rosie and Paul, we've got Cabinet Ministers arriving for the usual Cabinet session, the second one under Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. The Culture Secretary has just gone in, and Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, has also just gone in to number 10. He working on that big fiscal statement in a couple of weeks' time. In fact, here is Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, going in to Downing Street this morning. Cabinet starting in a couple of minutes' time. It's also Jeremy Hunt's birthday today. 56 is your little fact of the day.
Great fact. Thank you, Darren. That's our political editor at Downing Street, Darren McCaffrey there. We are hoping to speak to Robert Jenrick, the Immigration Minister, shortly. In the meantime, speaking of Jeremy Hunt, both he and the
Prime Minister
both reportedly in the Telegraph this morning, hoping to plug a £50 billion black hole in the public finances with that budget due on November the 17th.
How are they going to do that? Hints of it on the front page of the Telegraph, and someone who can fill us in is our GB News Business and Economics editor, Liam Halligan. So, Liam, tell us more. The front page of the Telegraph says, sweeping tax rises on a rough road ahead. How bumpy could it get?
We've got sweeping tax rises on the rough road ahead in the Telegraph, in the Express. Dire warning, higher tax on way to plug debt. I think what we're basically seeing here, Rosie, is a good old-fashioned softening up exercise ahead of that autumn statement on Thursday, the 17th of November. We were going to have a Halloween fiscal statement, but that was always a mistake, albeit a headline writer's dream. They've now pushed it to the 17th of November. And it's clear that even though there are signs the public finances are improving, because government borrowing costs have come down, the markets have calmed down, the pound's got a little bit stronger, which means that there should be a bit less inflation. We're still in a situation where the economy's slowing. That could lead to a big hole in the public finances, less tax revenue when there's less activity going on. And what Jeremy Hunt, happy birthday, Jeremy Hunt, and Rishi Sunak are saying is that whereas under George Osborne, any fiscal adjustment, any hole you had to plug, about 80% of the plugging exercise would be spending cuts, and about 20% would be tax rises. They don't want to go for 80% spending cuts. They want to go 50-50. So about half the adjustment will be spending cuts, or actually they're generally slowdowns in the rate of increase in spending when it comes to the public finances. And the other part will be tax rises, with those most able to bear the burden, those with the broadest shoulders, taking the most weight of that adjustment.
So who, what, how much? Do we have any ideas on these tax rises?
Well, there's a manifesto pledge. Remember those that the Tories wouldn't raise the national insurance rate or the basic rate of income tax. Though, of course, Rishi Sunak broke that manifesto pledge when he raised the rate of national insurance. A reversal. The only part of the mini budget really which survived was reversing that rate of increase of national insurance. So I think it's going to come on other things. I do think there's going to be more in terms of a windfall tax on oil and gas producers in the North Sea. I do think there may be more taxes on the wealthy, maybe changing the amount of relief they get for their pensions and so on. I do think there could be a bit of a clampdown on the so-called non-dom status of some wealthy people who have links with overseas countries who are living in the UK and don't pay tax on their worldwide income. Of course, Rishi Sunak may want to do that for personal reasons because he's been criticised in the past because his wife, she didn't break any laws, but she was non-domicile, and now she's changed that because she thinks it's, quotes, the right thing to do.
Politically, that would work for him nicely, wouldn't it, to introduce that, raise a bit of money, and it works for him. How, taking all those measures into account, though, is that going to raise 50 billion?
No.
No.
I don't think it's going to raise 50 billion.
Or 25.
On the non-dom thing, it will raise hardly any money. In fact, it could cost us money because it may mean fewer big high-rolling investors actually base themselves in London. But it's a good bit of class war. Sunak can counter Labour saying that how can somebody who's so wealthy be in Downing Street, and so he can use that to sort of as a political shield. Look, I've never really bought these kind of big tax and spending adjustments as a way to correct the public finances. The way you correct the public finances is growth. And on that basis, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng were right. Of course, they over-egged the pudding. They tried to do too much too soon. But it is growth. The rising tide lifts all boats. I think the government should be focusing on productivity, on skills, on those investment zones, which I do think was a good part of the Kwarteng-Truss policy proposal.
Because Michael Gove's going to... It sounds like he's going to bin them.
It may be. Of course, there's no love lost between Michael Gove and Liz Truss, and sometimes these things get personal. But it strikes me, unless we can get growth going, then trying to raise extra money by raising tax rates can be completely counterproductive. We know from when George Osborne lowered the top rate of tax, he actually raised more money. But, of course, that's politically anathema to lots of people. So these things are very, very difficult. But I do think we will see some tax rises, in summary, on the 17th of November. But I don't think they're going to be as bad as Sunak and Hunt are clearly briefing to the papers this morning.
Trying to soften us up,
Indeed.
as you suggested. Liam, thank you very much, our economics and business editor, joining us there. Right now, it is 12 minutes past 9. Let's briefly bring you up to date with other stories making the headlines today. And the International Trade Secretary says the UK must future-proof its economy by investing in green tech. Well, in a speech in Newcastle later today, Kemi Badenoch's expected to highlight new tech to combat climate change and to see how they could create high-paying skilled jobs and energy security.
The Northern Ireland Secretary will hold talks with Stormont leaders later today. There is uncertainty over whether he will call an election. Chris Eaton-Harris didn't set a date for a new poll last Friday, despite indicating he would.
Farmers have warned of the potential impact on the supply of turkeys this Christmas amid the UK's largest outbreak of bird flu. They say the current situation is unbelievably bad and represents the foot and mouth of the poultry industry. Well, bird keepers in England will be required to house their poultry indoors to tackle the spread of avian influenza.
And Collins Dictionary has announced that permacrisis is the word of the year. It describes an extended period of instability and insecurity. It's been used a lot more because of the ongoing crises in the UK and around the world.
Now, poppy peels are being launched across the country. In Lincolnshire, thousands of poppy petals, and it looks totally beautiful, have been launched from the back of a Lancaster bomber in honour of the British Armed Forces.
It's one of only a handful left in Britain and now serves as a symbol of remembrance, as our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis learned.
Once bombs fell from the Lancaster, now here in Lincolnshire, poppies. Quite a sight, even for 97-year-old Navy veteran Alfred, who watched the war end from his ship in Tokyo.
The Admiral of the British fleet went on board the Missouri to sign the declaration, and we could see in the distance them actually signing it, which was a great honour.
Ahead of Remembrance, the Royal British Legion sells poppies to raise funds for veterans while honouring the sacrifice made by so many in the armed forces. Hundreds of servicemen and women come to the old East Kirkby RAF base for the appeal's launch, including Clive.
I lost a few friends in Aden during my time in 64, 65 with the Coasting Guards, and it was just something that sticks with you.
John is county chairman at the Legion.
We believe that everybody wearing a poppy is remembering. It doesn't matter about necessarily how much money they've put into the pot to raise funds, but it's the wearing of the poppy that counts.
The old base is now a museum and home to Just Jane, one of only 4 Lancaster bombers left in the UK. During the war, more than 7,000 were built and are credited with taking the fight to Germany when Britain was facing defeat.
Despite the sheer scale of the bomber from the outside, inside it's actually quite tight. You can only imagine how difficult it was to walk around in here during a bombing raid above Berlin when you were being shot at. From this airfield alone at East Kirkby, 3 planes were lost on average a week.
Now Just Jane is used for remembrance events and heritage. She can't fly, but drives visitors along the runway. For Ivan, riding the Lancaster today is special.
The photograph you can see is my dad, and he was a frame mechanic, and behind him is a Lancaster which has been crashed. And he was an airframe mechanic, and this was his job, what they call the smash and grab crew. And I'm very proud of it.
Volunteers like Mark spend their time keeping this history alive.
The young ground crews would have charged the brake presses in exactly the same way, because they'd have moved the aircraft around on the ground to the dispersals.
It's hoped that Jane can be restored completely and fly in future memorials. Andrew is manager at the museum.
To come and see a Lancaster running, it's kind of the ultimate way to remember Bomber Command and those that gave their lives. It kind of takes on a whole different atmosphere and different feeling when it starts up and runs, rather than just being held in a hangar static.
Beyond the planes and poppies, Remembrance is about the people who gave their lives and still serve for Britain. Will Hollis for GB News in East Kirkby.
Such an iconic aircraft, isn't it? And so important to get your poppy this year. I was at the launch of the appeal last week, and the money that goes into the Royal British Legion from buying that poppy really helps, not just with those that have served in the armed forces, but also the families that are affected by those that have served in the armed forces. So it's really important.
Thank you to loads of you who've been getting in touch this morning. A little bit of bad news for you. Robert Jenrick has delayed his interview. He's coming on the channel, but a little bit later on today. Lots of you had questions we wanted to put directly to him, so we'll pass them on to the other presenters. But a very good morning to William, who says, talking about the language that Suella Braverman used, saying that the the people arriving in the UK is an invasion. William says, we don't want sugar-coated descriptions. Invasion told as it is.
Yeah, Dean says, turn the boats back, get the army in to process the claims and the Navy to take them back to France if they aren't genuine asylum seekers. And on the Shadow Culture Secretary, Lucy Powell, who we were speaking to earlier, Paul says, this is why Labour will never get my vote. Our Home Secretary said it how the majority of the country speaks and thinks. We are being invaded every day.
Keep those views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, coming up here on the programme, it's the first day of Movember, where men are encouraged to grow a moustache to raise money and awareness for men's health. We're going to be getting some tips on how to look after your moustache from a British moustache champion. Yes, that person does exist. We'll be meeting him after this.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News. Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
(22:09). Now, it's not only the first day of November today, it's the start of Movember, where men across the world grow moustaches to increase awareness and raise money for men's health issues.
But growing and maintaining a moustache can be difficult. So we've invited Mark East onto today's programme. He's the undisputed British moustache champion. What an absolute beauty that is, Mark. Just talk us through how long you've been growing it and how you've cultivated it.
I basically started when I left school. I was working outside on farms, and I just grew the beard and everything just to protect the face from the weather. And then farming came to an end for me, and I moved to the security sector, and it went down to a goatee. Became a pub landlord, and the goatee went and the moustache appeared, and it's just grown up from there.
And how have you sort of cultivated it? Do you feed it? Does it have a name?
Sometimes it's a pain in the... Well, we won't go there. It's oiled, it's buttered. All the good companies that make waxes and balms and such like for moustaches now, they all produce oils, they all produce butters. They get rubbed in every now and again. When I'm at work, it's generally styled like this. If I'm not public facing, then I can relax it a little bit and just have it as just in oil or in butter, just to keep it healthy.
Now, Mark, I'm sorry to do this, but I must do for people listening on the radio. It really does stand out because it's the only hair on your head and on your face.
It is indeed.
You must end up spending an awful lot of your time when you meet anyone new just talking about your moustache.
I get asked quite a few questions, yeah. It's quite a good icebreaker.
What are the things people are most interested in?
One of the main ones is it real?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it almost does look thick on, obviously, but not...
It's definitely real. It definitely moves.
What do you make of Movember? Lots of people will be trying to grow a moustache. I don't think it will take on yours, but why is the campaign important?
Movember's one of those times where men can do something for men's health. It doesn't matter what style of moustache you grow. It doesn't matter how good it is, how poor it is. You're doing something for charity. So it's something that you can get involved in, and you never know, you might even like it at the end of it and keep it. And then you can come along to our handlebar club and come and drink with us.
Yeah. How much have you raised with your moustache?
I'm involved very often with the police force down in Salisbury, where I was working once. And we ended up having vinyl moustaches across the front of all the police cars based at the Salisbury station. And I got invited to all the events that they were doing purely because what was on my face. Yeah. But wherever we go, as regards competitions or events or anything, there's always charity at the back front of it. Yeah. It's always there.
And any problems with like day-to-day activities? I don't know if you have a partner. Is kissing a problem? Married, eating?
But when she's got used to it now, but when we first got together, she used to sort of like roll the bottom of the lip up a little bit so she could kiss me. But that sort of like doesn't happen now.
Yeah. Oh, never mind. Can you just do a quick tweak like a Bond villain with it for us?
Oh, yeah, no problem at all. There you go. Look.
Oh, love that. Look at that. Loving.
There you go.
There you go.
Thank you so much for talking to us. If you're listening on the radio, you have missed a treat, so make sure you download the app and have a little look. Mark, really appreciate your time this morning, and what a fantastic cause Movember is as well.
You're more than welcome.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers. What was that?
Have you tried to go...
No, we're not going to do the question, I must ask you. They were saying that, weren't they? Hey, look who's coming up next. It's Tom with the briefing and the bearded briefing, I think they're calling it.
Yeah.
Yeah, admire that beard. That's it from us.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name